Hello folks, welcome to section 10, vulnerability audits. In this video, that is first video of section 10, I'm going to talk about tracing the packets. And actually it's a very good topic and it's going to be very helpful for you in your testers, in your work, and actually maybe personal training. We have two questions here that I may want to face in your mind. How do we trace packets? And actually, why we need it exactly? So, tracing the packet is one of the most things in the security words because, for example, we talk about Nmap a lot because this is the main things that we teaching in this course. So when we're using Nmap, we're tracing and trading, sending, getting the packets. We get information via the packet. We send our commands, trying to execute them, and then they send packets to the target. If you remember in the previous sections, sometimes we face the firewall of the website. We switches to try to get over the firewall, or sometimes we use the ping scanning that we do not to trace any leave any trace. So why? This is exactly what I'm talking about. The packets. Packets are important in the security world, and it's all about the packets. So how do we trace a packet? There is a very good application, Wireshark, that's used for monitoring or monitoring every package that comes to your servers or personal devices. And there's also lots of the monitorings and networking monitoring tools that you can use. But we're going to use Wireshark. It's one of the famous one, so it's actually easy to use and as a user friendly. And we're going to start with that one, trying to how to download it. Installation is easy, and how to use it actually is the most important thing. It's really actually good and helpful application to use. So let's go to the scenarios, and I'm going to show you how it works. In that case, you'll understand better. Let's go to our lab. But this time, I'm coming to our Windows machine, to change the environment. Actually, you can install it on your Linux and your Windows machine, anything you want. It's available for both of them. So here's the Wireshark, something like this. And if you want to know how to download it, just let me show you how to download it exactly. If we're going to the Wireshark, there's a Wireshark. There is a website. Go deep Wireshark, and here's a Wikipedia of it. So as we know, far from here, Wireshark is free open source and actually it's free, so you shouldn't pay for it to analyze the packets and the data in the network. Alright, so you can see you can hit the download button and it's going to start downloading. So I already installed, downloaded, so I'm just going to hit the start, click on it. You also Nmap Zenmap here. They will introduce you later. Previous video, sorry. So when we click on it, it's trying to, loading the stuffs. And then when it's loading, it's going to show you few interfaces. Some may wonder, okay, which one should I choose and what is it exactly? So we introduced ipconfig. Dash command before. So we know that our network adapter is Ethernet 0 or ETH0. So when we come to our Wireshark and ask us which one do you want to choose? Here's us, Ethernet 0. I'm going to click on it and wait to Wireshark load the packets. So as you can see, start analyzing the packets that are in our network. See, wow. So let's explain step by step. First, we have a time here. This is not very important, but it's good to know. We have the source here, and we have the destination. What is it exactly? Source is the place that packets sent by, and destination is the place that you receive it. So sometimes it's your machine, or sometimes it's your target, or some website, or some other devices in the network. So as you can see here, we have the source and destination with the IP addresses here. So what is our IP address? Let's see. This is our IP address. 205.30.0. Okay, this is our IP address. So, and this is the destination. Sometimes we were the destination and someone sent us some packets. So another thing here we have is a protocol. It's very important. So we can see which protocol and how it's used, and via which protocol we receive the packet or send a packet. Sometimes TCP, sometimes we have DNS. See, we have sometimes DNS. As you can see here, it's completely obvious that it's a network. The IP addresses are in the same network, so it's using DNS server. This is my default or manual configuration. So we have the DNS package here, and then we have something called length. That is that service package. I'm going to talk about it later. I want to show you an example. And we have the info of the package. See, each package, of course, have an info, and it has somewhere around here. And we can see that, okay, we have an ACK packet here, we have a SYN-ACK packet here, we have something like, all right, VMware try to broadcast and tell who was this IP and tell to the router. See, this is our router IP address we get from IP, and this is all the things that happen in our network. But let's go for an example. Look, there is a little box here. You can filter your analyze our results. For example, you can type HTTP. Hit enter. Okay, we don't have HTTP packets yet. That's great. So I just wanted to show you some example. For example, that's something that we usually face with. Let me clear the page for assembly. Okay. So I'm gonna ping a website here. Ping. But before that, as we know, ICMP protocol is for the ping. So I'm gonna hit the ICMP filter and hit the filters. So wait for the result here. I'm gonna repeat EC Council website, for example, council.org. All right, waiting for the result. See, as soon as possible that we get a result in the CMD or command prompt, we had the result in the Wireshark as well. So let's check out. We have the source here, which is our IP address, and we have destination, which is the EC Council website IP address. It sends some packet into it, an echo ping request, and then it's back to us. We reply that yes, we have the connection, and here's your packet, as I can see here. Real interesting, right? So let's talk about the length. If you click on each packet here, you can see some information about it. For example, in a frame, we have some information on it. Interfaces ID. Then we have arrival time, we have echo time, and we have frame number, frame length. So about the frame length. Sometimes we have something like pinging something, or I don't know, anything that could be possible, something like this. We have something length that tells us how big is the packet. So as you can see, it's 74 bytes, so it's actually nothing compared to other packets. So we can see here it's not something big deal, but sometimes we face to a large bytes that we then find out here when we saw that, oh, this is a large packets, and then you may want to be suspicious of that packet. Try to stop it, try to find out, is it a trustable source? Am I knowing it's happening or not? Could be malicious packets that send into your computer, or someone trying to attacking your computer or server, actually, or network. Let's close it. Let's go to the next option. We have Ethernet and SRC, that stands for source to VMware and the destination. The third one, we have the version 4, IP version 4, and the header length, and all the information about the packets. It's kind of binary, as you can see, it's kind of encryption for the packets. And we have the protocol here, for sure, and source and IP address. And we have an internet control message protocol, we have identifier, the TTL that we have here, that's time to leave, it's time to leave. And we have the data. Well, this was from the each packets. So let's check out the options. We have something like file here. It's same as the other applications, edit, open, save. If you click this button, it's gonna stop working, and you have control and have time to analyze it without having new packets here, having new results here. We have an edit option. We can use a find packet with a control F actually, and trying to find a specific packet you want. Then, of course, we have something like find next, find previous, ignore some packets if you want. You can just, for example, if you want to have a organize a Wireshark for your network, you can ignore the ICP packets. Doesn't show you, or some packets that have a little small length that doesn't important for you. In the Go on the wheel, we have the wheel to what you want to see exactly here. We have in the go to packets. Actually, we have something important here, the capture. If you click on a capture filter, you can see some captures here. That's very important for us. You can add or delete any filter you want. For example, as I said, some filters or some packets doesn't really important for you. You want a more organized Wireshark. You don't want to deal with the lots of packets each time, each second that come into your network and try to handle them. It's crazy. So for having better experience with that, you may want to filter your Wireshark to have a better experience. Promise me. You're gonna do that. We have analyze. You can analyze each filter here or decode it, and actually follow some packets here. We have statics. We have wireless, we have tools, and that's all. So we don't want to get into it a lot because this is not exactly our topic, but it's very important to know what's happening in the IT world when you sending packets, trying to find information from a website, trying to get information from it. This is actually what's happening. Now we know what's happening in the packets, and maybe you should tell that sooner, but actually it's good to know now, because sometimes it may be confusion that some people doesn't know what are they doing exactly. So let's get back to the slides. All right, so we have a quick brief on the packets, why we need it, how we're gonna do that, explain the tools, explore some comments here, and tell you how it works with it, and actually we see a little bit scenario and explain how you find out which protocol and which packet you're gonna use for it, and how to analyze the packets. Next video, I'm gonna talk about what are the firewall or IDSs. It's really actually important because we talk about how to, when we face the firewalls in our Nmap, so actually it's good to know what is firewall IDS, how it's going to work exactly in a network or a website. So see you and good luck. Hello again, folks. Welcome to another video from section 10. In this video, as I told you in the last video, I'm going to talk about what are firewalls and IDSs. So we're going to have an overview to what is actually firewall and what we're talking about when we saying that Nmap face the firewall or something like that. And also I'm just gonna have a tip on overview on IDSs and IPSs to have an overview and have a good knowledge about deep security in that. So exactly what is that? And we're gonna answer some questions in that for sure. So a very common query asked by network security administrator is that what is the difference between a firewalls, IPS and IDS? So I'm going to first talk about that and then show some example maybe in Locale Linux. So all the three terms related to providing security to network and are considered essential component of network security, especially in a data center networks and a big data servers and actually any company. So the main difference being that firewall platform actions such as blocking and filtering of traffic, while an IPS or IDS detects and alerts the system administrator or prevent attack as peer configuration. So you may find the usual firewall in your Windows machine. As Windows Defender, we have Windows Defender as a your antivirus, but you have a firewall in a Windows that's control the output and inbound and outbound in the network. So that's a very basic firewall. So a firewall allows traffic based on a set of the rules configured, and it relies on a source, so the destination addresses and the ports that set us to a firewall who can deny any traffic that does not meet any specific search area. But on the other hand, IDS is a passive device which watch packets that we talked about last video, packets of data transferring the network, comparing the signatures, patterns, and setting up an alarm on a detection on suspicious activities. On the other hand, we have IPS, that is an active device working in line mode and prevent attack by blocking it. So let's say we have some difference between them. So for example, a firewall is a network security device that filters incoming and outgoing networks traffic based on a parameterized rules. But or IDS and IPS. So maybe you want to know that IDS is based and stand for Intrusion Detection System. It's a device or a software application that monitors the traffic for malicious activities or policy violation and sends alert on detection. Firewall filters traffic based on IP address and port numbers. But the principle of working in IDS is it detects real-time traffic and looks for traffic patterns and signatures and attack them generation alerts. So how about the configuration mode? The firewall is in a layer 3 mode or transparent mode, but the IDS is in line or as the end host with span for monitoring and detection. Action on unauthorized traffic detection by a firewall is a blocked traffic, but in IDS is alert or alarm on a detection of anomaly. So, of course, based on the description that I gave you, it's very important that if you have a network security or if you have any servers, it's very important to use IDS and IPS in your systems and your server for sure, beside a firewall. Firewall is just the basic things that try to block the traffic. It's not gonna always be helpful for you. For example, as we saw in our previous sections, we always provide a solution to how to get over the firewalls, try to get a result at the end. Let's see some examples. So this is exactly how it works. We have the switches here and a router and a firewall here and IPS or IDS here. For example, if there's an internet here and there's a router here that connects us to our switches. We have firewall between a switch and a router here, and then IDS, that software could be a hardware connected us to our switches and try to detect any malicious activities, and then our clients. On the other hand, we have IPS then, exactly like IDS, but it will be placed between the switches and the firewall. Let's see our firewall in a Windows. It's a very basic firewall. But when you type firewall, you can see here that Windows Defender Firewall. Click on it and wait till it's open. So when you go to the security and maintenance or network and sharing centers, or you can turn Windows Defender on or off. That need the permission activities for administrator, so you can run it again with the run as administration with advanced securities. Gonna click yes. Alright, then we're gonna wait for it to open. Here we go. So this is our panel. We have inbound rules and outbound rules all set. So for example, you can set the rules for yourself in your firewall as you may want to, but it also have some default rules. For example, in inbound rules, we have so many default rules here. For example, for any application we have, there's some rules. For example, for any desk application that is a remote management, we have a profile as a private networks that allow and enable the action is allow for the AnyDesk, and this is the path of the program, and this is a protocol that's on a UDP, and any port is any, and remote port any. So we can see that inbound rule here to send a connection to the out, and inbound and outbound is approved by our firewall. So also you can deny or block any connection as you want. For example, in inbound rule, you try to give permissions, approve or deny any connection that sends information to the outside of the network, And the outbound rules try to block or confirm any information that comes to your network by outside of the network. So for example, in inbound rules, you can create a new rule here, as you can see. When you click on it, you can choose your type of rule here. For example, you want to give it in program a specific order. For example, you're going to click next and clear your program, or maybe all program. For example, if you want to, private network, or maybe you can choose any port you want. Click next. And I'm going to click all the remote ports on the TCP or the UDP, and I wanted to block the connection or allow the connection or allow the connection if it's secure. So if you want to deny every connection remote based upon your UDP port and deny it to your server, you can just click block on the connection and click next, and it's done. So for example, this was how we work in Windows machines. We can see also how it works in the Kali Linux in the following videos. So we have a quick brief on it, how it works, what is it, and actually we saw you how firewall works exactly and the logic behind it. In the next video, I'm going to talk about vulnerability scanning and try to give you some tips about it. Good luck. Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Section 10, Vulnerability Audits. In this video, I'm going to go an overview on vulnerability scanning and talk about how it works exactly, why we need it, and what is the benefits of it, and some other tools that we can work on exactly to do the vulnerability scanning. So we can ask and answer a few questions. So what is the vulnerability scanning used for? And for example, or more important than that, what is vulnerability scanning? So a vulnerability scanning assessed of possible security vulnerabilities in computers, networks, internal and external servers, and communication equipment that cyber criminals can exploit. So anything that could be hacked, vulnerability scan can assess of possible security vulnerabilities in that. So it's automated activity that scans in structure targets such as an IP addresses for known vulnerabilities and misconfigurations for sure, or misfiles, or anything that could lead us to dangerous activities from malicious activities. So the result vulnerabilities and the resulting of that assessment reports will help you to properly identify the security weakness that need to be resolved in your computer, in your server, or in your network. So what is vulnerability scanning used for? Vulnerability scanning is an essential part of mitigation for your organization's security risk by using a vulnerability scanner to identify the points of the weakness in your system. So you can reduce the attack surface that criminals or hackers might exploit, focusing your security efforts on the areas that are the most likely to be targeted. For example, the services that we talk about a lot in Nmap scanning, the SMB servers, the Active Directories. So vulnerability scans can also help to routinely audit IP address range to see if unauthorized services are being exposed or whatever any IP addresses are being used. So for example, imagine that in your server we have lots of IPs in your company. So when you find out one of the IPs in your server using unnecessary and unauthorized services, that's where you found out, okay, something is not right here. I need to stop that. So how vulnerability scanning and testing exactly work? There are two main types of vulnerability scanning. The first one is authentication scans will find weaknesses in your security perimeter. But the second one, authenticated scans use privileged credential to go further and deeper in your systems and server, finding security weaknesses and misconfigurations in your internal network. So whichever type you choose for vulnerability testing, you will use references database of known flaws, coding bugs, any OWASP available, or any type of vulnerability that available in exploitations, or configuration and errors and potential routes into corporate networks that attackers can exploit for sure. And these databases are updated continually, so it is very important to use and update vulnerability testing tools because database getting updated every day, and we have lots of updates every day. We have lots of exploits that's coming up every minute. So it's very important to be an update in this field. So I hope you know that, because one of the most important things, if you want to save your job, maybe in a company, you should be updated. So why is exactly important for us? Vulnerabilities and widespread across organizations of all sizes. New ones are discovered constantly or can be introduced as a result of the system changes. Hackers, criminals, and anyone who want to harm your systems use automated tools to identify and exploit known vulnerabilities and access unsecure systems, network, or data, or some of them who are professional trying to use it handy, try to find the skill injections, trying to find excess vulnerabilities in your website. So by having that acknowledge that you have these vulnerabilities in your web servers, in your network, in your computer, you can try to stop them and stop getting hacked by them and stop getting information to the outside world. Exploiting the vulnerabilities with automated tools is simple. For example, attacking are cheap, easy to run, and next, click on next. So every internet-facing organization is at risk. See? So, for example, anyone that have experience with hacking with a Kali Linux, try to have knowledge in the vulnerabilities, trying to go in, can attack your servers, attack your web servers easily. All it takes is one vulnerability for attacker or hacker to access your network, access your servers, and access your data. So this is why applying patches to fix these security vulnerabilities is essential. If you don't update your software, firmware, and operation system to the latest version that they have released from that, the vulnerabilities in your system will remain exploitable and leave your organization at risk. Worse than that, in a worst-case scenario, as your engineer, you should always have a worst-case scenario. The vast majority of instructions that are not discovered until it's far too late. So, for example, if you have firearm mandates trend reports, and if you search for that, you can see how many global median dwell time between the start of the cyber instruction and in the identification to them in the 56 days. So when they hacked, after 56 days, they find out, oh my god, we just get hacked. This is something that we call trouble and call disaster in a cybersecurity in a company. So automated vulnerability scanning tools scan for open ports and detect common services running off the ports, something like we did on Nmap. They identify any configuration issues or other vulnerabilities on those services and look at whatever the best practices being followed, such as the use of the TLS version 1.2 or higher and stronger ciphers. A vulnerability scanner reporter is the generator to highlight the item that you have identified. So, for example, when you're working in a company, your manager asks you to give a report about the status of the cybersecurity or the vulnerability that we have now, or something like overall scanning. So you should know how to generate a report, what is the reporting, what's important things that you should mention in the report. By acting on these findings, an organization can improve its security purchase. So who conducts a vulnerability scanning exactly? IT department usually undertake vulnerability scanning if they have the expertise and software to do so, or they can call on third-party security services provider like IT governance. IT governance scan are conducted on target that the client are necessary permission to have scanned, and the users of the services are required to confirm that they have these permissions. Vulnerability scans are also performed by attackers who spur the network and internet to find the points of entry into the system and networks. So, for example, we have bug bounties that they get paid to if they find anything. We have the IT security department in each network. We have third parties teams. So we have a good question here that says, how often should you conduct a vulnerability scanning? So this is very important. Based on everything we said, how often should we try to provide and perform such a scan, trying to find out when we start exactly and where we stand in the cybersecurity world. So vulnerability scanning needs to be conducted regularly to ensure that new vulnerabilities are identified as soon as they become common knowledge and that appropriate remedial action are taken, such as applying the necessary patches to the fixed cyber vulnerabilities. Frequent security scanning can show where exposed services are on patch and vulnerability to explosions, allowing IT team or security team to take the switch remedial actions. Also, you should have a vulnerability management program. This should include the scanning at least monthly, once a month, and annual penetration testing, as well as when you make changes to your system. And actually, it's based on how important data do you have, how business you run. For example, if you run a big data things that's conclude lots of user data, you should do it 2 weeks, one day in 2 weeks, or try to monthly, twice in a monthly, because it's very important to you, because you have the users data, users information, and actually you're responsible for that. So this will help identify your security weaknesses and extent to which are you, and how you're going to be attacked, or are you exposed to be attacked, or are you vulnerable to the cybersecurity or not. So when you ask what is the difference between the vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, when we're saying that you should have them, for example, once a month and another once a month again. So vulnerability scanning is an automated process that identifies your cybersecurity weaknesses. But penetration testing goes one step further. It involves the professional ethical hackers combining the result of the automation scans with their expertise to reveal vulnerabilities that may not be identified by scan alone. Pen testers will also take your environment into account, a significant factor in determining vulnerabilities through severity, upgrading or downgrading the score as appropriate. We have three types of them. For example, we have white box, we have black box, and we have gray box. They can also identify the false positive, where scans have identified a weakness that do not exist. So be aware of that. Sometimes you find a vulnerability, try to report it, but actually it's a false positive. To ensure that you do not waste resources securing parts of your structure that are not safe from attack. So as we are in a coronavirus world, and in this era, we need to work remotely. So how vulnerability scanning and remote working. Identify and mitigation security vulnerability is especially important when staff work from home. For instance, when you connect to the internet via home network, security features that you usually take for granted in the office, such as filtering, firewalls, and encryption, might not be available. And when staff use their own equipment, known as BOD or bring your own devices, to connect to the corporation network, you will have less control over the configuration of their security setting for sure. Keeping your VPN from the company software up to date is also essential to ensure that staff have a secure remote access to a corporate system. So may you don't have a company or not working in a company, and you may ask, can vulnerability scanning help identify vulnerabilities on my website, personal website? And answer is yes, for sure. We have some websites that ethical hackers try to deface or hack the website and expose the information, try to make a resume for themselves, trying to make flags for themselves. So may your website be one of the targets. So if you hear about your business, personal information, you may want to do that, because it's very important to keep your data safe. And actually, we are going to make the world and cybersecurity and internet actually safer. Before heading up to Cal Linux, let's share some good vulnerability scanners tools that you can use. So let's check their website. The first one is Connex. This tool actually could perform a good vulnerability scanning for you, and you can actually get a demo from them. Find what other scanners can do. Let's see how Connex tried to promote himself. They take over 7,000 vulnerabilities, including skill injection, XSS misconfiguration, weak password, exposed database, and out of band vulnerabilities using environmental neglect. We have advanced mark recording, scan all pages, web pages. So, as you can see here, Connex is one of the good ones. I used it before. It's good. Sometimes it gives you a false positive, but actually it's try to its best. The next one is actually very famous, is ASUS. So we can go to the website. Here is it. It's enabled, and the product is an ASUS. So we can actually have a free download here.
that try to give you some scan 16 IPs. That's the demo one. But actually, you can buy one for your personal use or business use. This is a very good one. I used it before. It's very trustful, and I can't tell you how much is good exactly, so you can use it or use a free demo. We have NetherSpark. Okay, here's it. The NetherSpark. This one is actually not bad. I tried before. So if you want to rate it, this is the first one that I use, and the QNX is the second one, and this one is going to be the third one maybe. You can get a demo also here. This wasn't the one that we're looking for. You can get a demo here. Exactly the same output like Connex. So automated and security through your CDLC, try to promote themselves and all the features that it's gonna give you. And useful. So maybe you want to decide with a price and your actions, which one is the best for you. So let's go to our Kali Linux. Alright, we are in Kali Linux. So in Kali Linux, actually we have one topic that says vulnerability analyzing that try to give you some good features about that. We have vulnerability analysis and we have web application analysis. So when you click on it, vulnerability analysis, we have actually few of vulnerability scannings. For example, we have Nmap that we work for, and we have Nikto. Let's click on Nikto. Let's see what's happened next. Okay. Here's a Nikto configuration. So first you can configure your configuration file as you may want to, the formats, plugins, and the routes, everything that you need to. We have also, for example, in a web application analysis or vulnerability analysis, we have Nikto, we have Nmap that we use to work with it. We have OpenWASP that is also a good one that you can work with it. So we can first initial setup and then start it and start working on it. Also, we have some good tools in web application analysis, such as Birdforce, that is very useful. That's also have lots of things in it when you require the separate course for it. We have a school map that's also very good. We have a PSScan that is useful for the WordPress websites. We have Zap, we have WebScrap. So we have good tools actually in the Kali Linux as well. So you can scroll them and work with them, try to see the help desk on that, or try to use a man command to find out how it's worked exactly. First, we have a quick brief on what we're telling here and what we're going to do, and try to explain about vulnerability analysis and vulnerability testing. Try to see the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. Also, introduce some tools to you to upgrade, improve your knowledge. Try to engage yourself with the more important tools as well. In the next video, we're going to talk about exploiting real VNC. Good luck. Hello everyone, and here we are again with another video from section 10, vulnerability audit. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about exploiting real VNC. And actually, the reason I'm recording this video is that I'm going to show you two very useful and important websites that we're going to talk about it. I'm going to answer some questions, and then we're going to talk about the websites and why we're recording this video. So let's go. Well, here we are. We have two websites here. Now Chrome. The first one is rapid7.com, and the other one is exploit-db.com. First, let's go to the real VNC authentication and talk about it and see what information we have here and why these websites are useful for us. So we can see the disclosed and created of this authentication mode bypass. Description: this module exploits an authentication bypass vulnerability in real VNC server version 4.1.0
and 4.1.1. It says a proxy listener, an L port and proxies to target server, and auto VNC options require that VNC Weaver be installed on the attacking machine. We can see the other here and developer. So display the available options, load the module between the Metasploit console and run the command shown option for sure in advance. So if you remember that, when we talk about Metasploit, when we run the Metasploit, we have some command like this, MSF, and that's stand for Metasploit console. That's use this command, and if you want to use this exploit in the Metasploit, you should run this command and then show actions, set actions, show options, then set a port and lhost and run. But as you can see, we have some comments and description about what we have here. So that's kind of interesting. So what is this website exactly? You may wonder. Let's go to the main page. Rapid7. And if you scroll down here, click on Vulnerability and Exploit Database, you have a variety of exploits and updated exploits that you can see and use them actually on your target. So imagine that you're using Nmap to scan your host, and then you find out that your host has some vulnerability that's not patched. So when you come here and you search for the vulnerability or related vulnerabilities, you can find it and use it on target. That's interesting, right? And you can see here we have a Firefox security updates. That was a new patch. And we have all the CVs here. Let's go to the next website, exploit-db. That's very, very important. So we have the same thing here, but this time we have all the code in one. You can download the exploit. And here's information about it. So this website, for example, when you click on exploits, have exactly the same thing. We have lots of exploits here that you can explore and try to see, find your own exploit they're going to use for it. And here's the modules and platforms and types. For example, web apps, locals, we have PHP hardware, we have Windows, so we have some can enable patch here, vulnerabilities here for exploiting. So we can find your platform if you want to, using Windows, for example, you can filter it here, or you can use it in return on platform if you want to find any exploit from Android or anything else. You can just scroll down here for Windows, Python 3 if you want to find exploits for Python 3. Actually, it's a good option. Let's see what we have here. We have some penetration Kali all new for example, we have training here. Then we can scroll down again and see, okay, what we have for Windows. Wow, okay, we have a lot of it. Actually, we have some goods. We have RCE, that stands for Remote Code Execution. This is one of the most important things in OWASP Top 10 that you can use for penetration testing your targets. So, as you can see here, we have really good things here. They can use it on your targets because most of them are updated, as you can see, the dates. So that means sometimes, not sometimes, the people doesn't care about the updates and security patches. So if you have the ability to scan, try to scan it and try to penetration test it and try to use it in your own purposes, it can be very helpful. And actually, it's very good for penetration testings and ethical hacking companies because some system administrations doesn't care about their system updates. So very, very be aware of that. If you are one of them, do not continue that. Try to always check the patches. Try to always have a security vulnerabilities for yourself and try to check all of them. Let's see other options here. We have shellcodes. That's also the good things. You can just explore more about it here. For example, we have something here. Windows reverse TCP. All right. Okay. Here's the code. Here's the descriptions that we have. And actually, it's a very good thing. Over here, the code, char code, using for penetration testing is very important. You can get access with that. And yeah, that's it. We have a quick brief on why this website is very important. I'm trying to show you one example on a real VNC.
and show you the commands and how to execute it in a terminal. The next video, I'm going to be talking about detecting vulnerability and vulnerable Windows systems that we're going to use commands in our Kali Linux. Good luck. Alright folks, welcome back to another video from section 10, vulnerability audits. In this video, as you can see, we're going to talk about detecting vulnerable Windows systems in section 10, and the last video actually from section 10, this is video 10.5. So as always, we're going to answer some questions talking about the Windows vulnerabilities, and it's actually one example from it because in the previous videos we talked about scanners, and actually I'm going to show you one of them that I have. And actually talk about Windows vulnerabilities, famous things, and try to have an overview on it. Let's go. Alright, this is the Sparker. So as I mentioned in the previous video, you can use any vulnerability scanner you want based on your will. You can just try to find area that you like, and this is your decision. So I'm using this one now, so for example, to see how it works. So this is kind of like this environment. All of them have the same things here. When you click on a new, you're gonna give a new address to scan, and you press that. Click on Start Scanning, waiting to retrieval, allocated. Make sure that the website that you're trying to analyze it is gonna have some log. So make sure that you didn't ethical hacking or ethical penetration testing or analyzing, because the owner can sue you for analyzing the websites if it's harmed the files and the website actually. So when it's start scanning, we'll wait for the packets. Okay, so start sending packets. We're gonna give it some time, so it's taking a long time. As you can see here, it's trying to crawl on the website first. Now we have some directory from the website, and it's trying to using a get method against the target and permits and current activities, trying to get a lot of information from it, try to understand what's happening in the web, attacking the directories. And here, if you find anything, so let's take a look here. Here we can choose security test that we want. Let's try to analyze the most famous vulnerabilities that could be available on the website. Here's details from directory of the targets. Each directory we can see the website map here. And here's something like we call it now vulnerability. It doesn't really count. So we can see the details. If you find anything, it's gonna show as a red flag, and here are gonna be vulnerability details, impact, remedy, and the classification, and the URL and expected version. So we have a reporting tool as well. All of the scanners have it. You can report and make a report actually by click on it, and actually you should customize your report for sure for your employee or your supervisor. But for now, let's talk a bit about the top 10 Windows 10 vulnerabilities. So the first one is at the end. So I'm just gonna start with number 10 and go down. Is Windows 10 Mouse Manager vulnerability. It's called a CVE 2015, and you can see the serial. If you type it into Google, you can see it and exploit websites. This vulnerability involves potential escalation by privilege by inserting a USB device into a target system. Through this method, an attacker could write a malicious binary to disk and execute this code. So an update is available now, so you can just search for the CVE. Probably you're gonna have the update if you keep yourself up to date every time. As I said, very important. Next one is Microsoft Edge vulnerabilities. The Edge browser's executed Internet Explorer was not the highest rated in the term of security for sure. We know that. We're not gonna judge that, but we know that true. To say the least, and Edge seems to be also getting off a rough start security-wise, and various remote code execution vulnerabilities and security feature bypass exploiting can allow the attackers to gain control over a system. More information and patching instructions are available in this
link. I'm going to put this on the PDF as well. Microsoft Graphics component vulnerabilities is a grouping of vulnerabilities related to the various fonts and graphic card memory. Just to mention it again, if you search it, you can see all the details about it and even exploit if you want to practice for it. Management flaws that could ultimately result in a removed code execution if visiting an untrusted website with embedded fonts. Detailed patching information can be had on the item's security bulletin. Number 7 is Internet Explorer vulnerabilities. Again, the Microsoft famous Mojang in the web browser has a slew of new vulnerabilities with the Windows 10. The most serious of them is allowing an attacker to gain a system right of the user. Clear, right? More information and patching details also available on the Microsoft website. Microsoft Windows Journal vulnerability, and again a serial. This vulnerability could allow remote code execution to occur if user open a specially crafted journal file. The number 5 is redirect to SMB vulnerabilities. Actually, the SMB vulnerabilities, lots of vulnerabilities. You can just search for it and see a lot of them. Another point is this vulnerability does not mean the last of vulnerabilities. It means the biggest vulnerability just released during these years. Of course, there's a lot of vulnerabilities for Windows in the 2019 or 2020. You can just search for it. Net framework resolution of privilege vulnerabilities. Custom craft .NET application can cause escalation of the privilege exploit to occur. However, users must be first convinced or tricked, like social engineering, into running the said application. Microsoft font driver vulnerabilities. Windows Adobe Type Manager improperly handles specially crafted OpenType fonts, which can result in a remote code execution vulnerabilities if you work with Adobe. You can understand what I'm saying. This may lead the attacker to gaining complete control of the system installation program. The number 2 is coming with the Windows 10 Wi-Fi Sense contact sharing. By default, Windows 10 will share your Wi-Fi credential to Outlook, Skype, and Facebook contacts. You may assume that to make Wi-Fi and hotspot sharing easier, this may make it possible for any of these, as I said, contacts to hook onto your Wi-Fi network without any authentication and authorization. While not necessary software vulnerability, this feature can lead to compromise and should be remedied through the following step. First, change the Wi-Fi network name, SSID, include the terms, and underline no map, underline up TOUT, and prior to upgrade to Windows 10. And post upgrade, change your Windows privacy setting to disable Wi-Fi sense sharing. Win32k elevation of the privilege vulnerability. This is the serial. You can search for that. This vulnerability involving a flaw in a GUI component Windows 10, namely the scrollable elements, allow a threat actor to gain complete control of the Windows machine through the privilege escalation. So to fix above vulnerabilities, you need to identify the required updates as noted by Windows updates. Try to check always your Windows updates. Try to check out the Microsoft documents and see what's happening there. Our powerful policy engine can validate secure configuration for all the environments, structures, and application stacks. In this case, a simple Windows 10 security policy can be run or check any of these above vulnerabilities, as well as new vulnerabilities not yet added to the policy. Our OWL-backed vulnerability detection and monitoring suite ensure that all the Windows 10 nodes in our environments are free to vulnerabilities and security flaws. So I put a source here if you want to continue reading for the articles as well. So we talk a little about the Windows Vulnerability Scanner, show you an example, and Vulnerability Windows, try to talk about some famous one, and explaining what's happening exactly. There I show you the exploit website. You can see and search for the new vulnerabilities and exploit that just released. The next video going to be first video from section 11, taking it to the next level. Good luck. Hello folks, welcome to another section from this course, taking to another level, to the next level, in the section 11. Let's go. Alright, in this video I'm going to talk about bash scripting. So it's actually not related to our topic, but as we talk about a lot about Linux and kinda, we can deep to it, so I was like, it's a good idea to talk about bash scripting because
if you're learning Linux and any related operating systems, Ubuntu, CentOS, or Fedora, Backbox, any distribution of the Linux, Unix, or Debians, you need to know Bash scripting. It's very important, and you need to know it. So I was like, why I don't have a tutorial on it? Try to give some example. Try to write some program in it, actually, to automate the programs and then everything. So let's go. What is Bash scripting? Before going to show an example and everything, you may wonder, alright, what is Bash scripting? A shell script or Bash script is a computer program designed to be run by a Unix shell, a common language interpreter, and the various directed of shell script are considered to be a scripting language. Typical operations performed by shell script include the file manipulations, program executions, and printing tests and automations programs. So actually try to automate the things, try to run the things exactly like a programming languages. Python, JavaScript, Java, C++, C#, considered as well programming languages, but in a Unix shell. Alright, let's go to our lab. Here we are in our lab, this time using CentOS 7. You can use your last operating system, which was Kali Linux. No worries about it. So I'm in my directory called bash. If you want to put all your script into one directory, you can use mkdir and your directory name, which is easy, I talked about it before, and cd to it. Alright, let's create our first program. So one important thing is that if you remember in the Python languages, when you run a program, it was .py, but here we have .sh, which stand for Bash scripting or shell scripting. So be aware of that, and if you want to run your program, you need to have .sh extension. Alright. Okay, I write one example before, but it's going to delete it. But one of the most important things you need to do is that you have this on the first line, which is very important. Do not forget to add it in every shell script you write. It's called the shebang line, and you need to add it in the first line of your program. So this is it. Alright, so I'm going with the easy one. As you know, we have echo, which I'll talk about in the first or second section in this course. It's kind of like using print something. So I'm going to say hello world, typical first word in the programming languages with a smiley face here. I'm going to close this and then save it. And do not forget to give the right permission to it. That's it. Then run it like this. Here we go. We have a print hello world and the smiley face here. Let's go to our file again. Let's close the page. We don't want echo anymore. Let's actually run a Linux command, another Linux command, for example ls-l. Let's see what happened here. Alright, we have ls-l result out here. So what happens if we give another directory of it? Alright, it shows all the files in our home directory. That's great. Close the page, go to the command, and edit the file again. So now I want to do like to the next level and a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to use a value called greeting. I'm going to fit it into welcome. W welcome. And then a variable here called user. Use the $sign to run this command called who am I. So Linux command played before. Let's run try to find out which user are we using now. And another variable called day, because I want to run a dates command in Linux. Plus play and close it. And go to the next line. You can always use something like commenting on your code. But let's comment It's very important when you back to your code, you can understand what you do exactly. And then I'm going to use echo again to print not just a word. I'm going to use my variable called greeting back user. Let's add a smiley face here too. All right. And then say today is an variable day. Have a great day. And then I'm actually going to echo another thing here. It says your bash shell version is. Good luck. Okay, that's right. Let's see what's happened now. Okay, we did something wrong here. Line 9 and line 11. That's great. Need to know. All right. That's it. That's what we did wrong. All right. Okay, what's now? That's great. So it says, welcome back. My username, and today is Saturday. Have a great day. Your bash shell version is the version and the release, and says good luck. Let's take a look at the command on the code now. So here we set a variable called welcome, and then we set a variable here called user to run who am I, and day to call the day and tell us which day we are in. At the end, it was like, okay, echo this variable, which is welcome, and say back and welcome back, and the variable user, which whoever is it, and then today is the day. That's gonna find out which day is it. And so have a great day. Or we can say like this actually. So happy day, right? So happy Saturday. And at the end, we ask it to show us the bash version. It shows. So this is an example and simple things in bash scripting, variables and stuff. Let's go back to PowerPoints. We have a quick brief on a bash script and what is it and why we need it exactly. And show you an example, try to run a script, and try to explain how you could repeatedly tasks and automate a task on the Linux file systems. And try to show an example by running 2 or 3 programs. The next video is going to be Nmap bash scripting, and we're going to combine Nmap and bash scripting together. Hello everyone again, and welcome back to another video from this section, section 11. In this video, with regard to the last video, we're going to talk about Nmap bash scripting again. So again, we're going to talk about bash scripting, and also I'm going to show you some examples that can be helpful during your process, and show you some tips to how you can find more source and scripts and tools modified by many others in many websites. Probably going to know that, but I'm just going to hit the road and show you some examples. Let's go. Well, one of the useful websites that you can probably use and found is GitHub. I think you usually heard of it, but if you don't, it's a platform for many sources in many languages. So you can just search anything you want and just find a script that fits your requirements or your purpose that you want to do with it. So for example, we have a simple Nmap script here. Let's check out the code. As we can see in the first of the line, as I mentioned before, you should write your shebang line. Then, or rather, this guy, Snodro Gallo, if I'm pronouncing it right, come here and in the line 3, try to come up with a value, an argument to say scans and scanned dir and tmp over temp. At echo, it's echoing some lines to show when the codes run. And then come in the line says user and mail addresses to send tarball with the scan results. We have echo to print again and show names, the variable, and then the list of users. Then we have the while loop here. That is a programming basics that I'm not going to talk about it here because this is not a programming course, but at all. You can search for it, while loop. Then we have F here in the while loop. Let's come to the phi and down here. As you can see here, try to read the username that defined here. So when we're scrolling down, you can reach to the main things that we have. Here, try to scan the profile definitions which user runs the script. When the user runs the script, the definition are going to be the mkdir making a directory in the Linux and then run this script and name 0 to the value 0 and destination gonna hit the nmap dash $scan name that this one present one of the arguments and value that sets and the IP address that user set for the target. And then the arguments dash S capital P and dash capital PS, the port 18, and nmap.xl, and we have the IP address again here. So as I can see, it's a complete bash scripting nmap source here. We can search for many things again. For example, we can type nmap. Let's search it in the main page. Alright, we have lots of results here. So we have one code here called shell on Lua. That's for, as I mentioned in the very last videos, is for NSE or nmap script engine. So we have a shell script here. We're going to check the shell script one. So here's the process of it, how it's working. As you can see, when the code's run, this is how it works. Very neat and very clear. Very well. So let's have a summary here. We have a summary of the code and the features, how it's going to work, and run on any shell that's a nmap automator is 100% plus a complement. So it can run on any shell environment. So it can run on your Kali Linux and any machine that you have. Let's see the code, shall we? Here we are. Here's the code. You can review the code and try to practice for yourself at your home. Let's see the other codes. So you can just download the codes. Let me show you again. When you click on the code, you can copy this and use a widget command and install the tool here. So we can just find that. As you can see here, you can find the language that is run with. So we try to find a shell script here. We have many languages actually. We have Python. Let's check out the Python actually. All right. Here's it. We have Python code here. As you can see, it's used shebang line, but this time for Python. So for each programming languages, we have different shebang line. Don't forget that. When we have the print here, for banner, we have the IP address. Please input the IP address they want. So when the user runs the script, ask him to put the IP address and then print your IP address that entered is the IP address. Here's it. And then type address and present the input. Please enter the type of scan you want to. We have 3 options here. We're going to present it. Then it's going to show us what we select. And then if represent not in the represent dash key, try to say that if the user selected different things or some nonsense things and do not use one of these options, try to get back into the value option, and else print nmap version scanner.nmap version and try to run the script here, as you can see. Well, as I mentioned, Nmap scripting engine is one of the Nmap most powerful and flexible features, and allows the user to write and share simple scripts to automate a wide variety of the networking tasks. Also, the bash script is used to automate a representative task on a Linux file system. It might include a set of commands or a single command, or it might contain a hallmarks after imperative commands like a loop, while, if, function, conditions, constructs, and etc. The scripting bash is a type of interpreter that processes shell commands. A shell bash script is a text file containing a series of command shell. In the next video, I got a hit on this video too. We're going to talk about Python scripting, give you some example of a Python, how to work with Python as a beginner. Let's go. Hello everyone, and welcome to the last video from section 11, taking it to the next level. Alright, in this video I'm going to talk about Python scripting, give you some basic things about it. This is the last video, so that means that this course is going to end. I really suggest to always be updated, keep learning, don't forget to practice all the time, use many sources, take courses, read books, and try to actually practice a lot. Say that again because it's very important. You learn it by practicing, trying to make your resume for yourself, trying to do projects, small projects, and that's it. Yeah, let's go. I'm going to talk about Python scripting, how we can Python scripting, why we need it. The same as a shell scripting, I will scribe here. Let's go to the lab. Alright, same as always, we're on your machine. You can use your Kali Linux as well. Well, first of all, I'm gonna make a directory called Python scripts. I'm gonna set it to it. Scripts. I'm actually gonna make a new file called first.py. So for the shell script it was sh, and for Python is py. First thing we need to do is to add the shipping line. Don't forget your shipping line, it's very important. Alright. The next thing is, in Python we have so many things, but before do anything after the shipping line is that we should add the library to do our stuff. So each thing's in the programming, for example, they have their own library. In the bash scripting, there's not many library because all that we do is the bash scripting, the bash shell, and the bash command. But in Python, in many other languages, you need to add a library for the job you want to. So, for example, the things that usually we want to use in this scripting for the nmaps, or the things that we want to run in Kali Linux as a command, is import OS. We import the libraries with this command called import, and then the library. You can also always go to the Google and find some libraries you need, or try to find out if you want to do something special and specific. Try to find a library you need. Sometimes you cannot run the script without adding the library. Actually, for example, if you want to run the command nmap for a script, we need to add the import OS for a script. So in that case, it's not going to work if we do not add the import OS. Alright, Python library. Right. But actually, you can say Python libraries for Nmap or ethical hacking or anything that you wish to do it. Alright, we have the first website here. So you can use it, read it, and actually see what's happening here. So we have a project description here. The Python Diction Map is a Python library which helps us in using a Nmap port scanner. It's allowed to easily manipulate the Nmap scan result and will be a perfect tool for system administrators who want automized scanning tasks and report it. Also support Nmap scanning out of it. So how to download it? The latest version of the library. This is the file name. You can say htclone, or based on the distribution that you use, maybe the commands is different. And also the installation and pip install. and the usage, and also here is an example of it. For example, as you can see here, you use mmap import and nmap. So as I said, we use import to import a library here, and then try to set a variable, call it n, m, and set it for nmap port scanner, and then go to IP by default and port, and then here we go. As you can see, all the results here. There's many things that you can find in libraries, or if you just permission this thing. There we go. Alright, top 5 Python libraries for print testers. Very nice. Actually, all of them are good. We see this one, Python Nmap. But in this script, I'm not going to provide the Nmap library because we can do it differently. If you have Kali Linux or a system that have already installed Nmap on it, so you don't you can just run it in a simple script. After importing a OS library, the first thing you need to learn is how to ask a user something. For example, we're going to type IP address. And add it to the input and ask user, target IP address. So actually we asking them to type IP address of the target. So this is how we ask something from user in Python 3 actually. And then, for example, let's see how it works. Let's print. We use print command to print something in the Python. Alright, so just gonna forget about print address for now. So this is how you can print something here. But now the most important things I want to tell you, also you can use a command and add this command with adding this and actually typing something. Port nmap command. So how to use a command and actually execute a command in Python programming. So this is how you use os.system and actually cell nmap dash T for a and the IP address. That's it. So what if you don't want to okay, this is how it works. When you use os.system nmap-t4, you actually, when you execute, it's going to show you on a terminal. So what's happened? Let's see some example. For example, I don't want to use nmap for now. I'm just going to say ls-a to just run a quick command. Let's see what's happened. Alright, as you can see, it's from the ls-l command. So sometimes we don't want to show the comment. So actually, when you use this value, it's going to actually show the result of it. So what happens if you want to not show the result at all to the user? You're going to say os.p open. So when it's run, it's not going to show the user, so you can actually put in a variable. So also, for example, when you run something here, you can set it for some other variable here, and then do something with the variable. So you can say while true. What is while? We're setting some execution here that says while something is true or something is false, do something else. For example, if the comment was true or if the comment was, the most simple thing is that say while true and then set to print something. And then if you don't want to, when you want to break the while and this loop, you're going to type something break, and then the loop will be break. We have the if loop here as well. is saying that if the command was equal or not equal to something, then can do something, print type. Sorry, I'm going to say the IP address because we put a value to ask something from user, not from our value that we set. IP. And says, after that, I'm going to say else. After if we have else, it's going to say if something that happened, go to the else and actually execute it. So actually we can move this to here. Actually, don't forget to organize it because it's not going to work. So we're going to say that if the IP address was equal or not equal to something, then you can just make it for yourself, print something like type an IP because the user did not type IP, and then says else. If the user typed right IP or in the right format, says else command os.system. Actually, you can make that execution that says make sure that the user type an IP, a number, not just some nonsense words. We have something called int and string called str, or that stands for string, and int. Int is for using for numbers, and string actually use for words or anything more than a number. Don't forget that. You can actually set that to make sure the user with using while or for. Oh, actually, it's tell about for too. We have something called for as well that you can use it in a while loop when you're having a while here. While true. Same here. Saying while true. Don't forget actually do this. Sorry. All right. We need to have this at the end of the command. All right. While true. And we have a for here to execute something else in a while loop. All right. Well, have a summary. The Python Nmap is a Python library which helps in using Nmap to port scanners and make a job easy as well. The Nmap Python is allowed to easily manipulate Nmap scan results and will be a perfect tool for system administrators who want to automate scanning tasks and reports. Thanks for watching us from here, and I hope you doing the best in your journey, in your field, and always keep learning, try to keep it up, doing well, and always practice. Good luck, and I hope to see you again.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Windows Penetration Essentials course. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at setting up our penetration testing distribution and the hypervisor that we'll be using. Later on in this section, we'll get started with setting up our vulnerable boxes, and then we'll finally conclude with installing the various tools that are very helpful or that are used when performing Windows penetration testing. Alright, so let's get started. Now, as you can see, my host operating system that I'm using right now is Windows 10. So again, this video and the installation instructions will work for any operating system, regardless of whether you're using Windows, Linux, macOS, even BSD, right? So we've opted to use VirtualBox and Kali Linux as our pen testing distributions, and for good reason. VirtualBox is completely open source, which means you don't have any issue of licenses, and you can essentially install it on any operating system really easily. And for Kali Linux, it is one of the most popular penetration testing distributions and one that is supported by many organizations as the official de facto standard. So let's get started. Now, I'm just going to open up Firefox here, and you can see I'm currently on the VirtualBox download page. And you can do that by going to virtualbox.org and wiki downloads, right? And this will give you the various binaries for your various operating systems. So you have Windows, macOS, Linux, Solaris, etc. For your Linux distributions, you don't have a binary. Instead, you have the actual installation instructions for the various package managers. And in the event you do have the actual binary or the source code, there are instructions on how to compile the software yourself. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. So once you've downloaded VirtualBox, you can go ahead and install it. It really is a very simple install in terms of the installation wizard on Windows. It's even simpler on Linux and Mac OS. All right, so once you have VirtualBox installed, we can now get to the actual meat and potatoes, which is Kali Linux here. So you want to go head over to Offensive Security, and if you go to kali.org under downloads, we are not looking for the ISO file, right? So the ISO file is essentially the installer, and we don't want to go through the Kali install. The reason for that is we're going to be working in a virtualized environment, which means we can actually use their official VMware or VirtualBox images, right? So in our case, we're using VirtualBox. You can go ahead and use VMware if you want. It's entirely up to you. So I'll click on the Offensive Security VM download page, and this will give us the various images for the various hypervisors. So for example, for VMware, we have the images here. For VirtualBox, we have the images here, and you can download the latest version. And the great thing about downloading a VM image is it already has everything installed, and you really do not need to go through the install process. You just need to click on the OVA file or the OVF file, and it'll import the virtual machine for you, already installed, and you can get started immediately. All right, so once you have that downloaded, we can now get started. In my case, I have my virtual image here that is currently the version 2019.4, so it's a bit outdated. And again, I recommend that you use the latest version. The reason I have the outdated image is because I can easily just update the packages and update the entire distribution whenever I want to, instead of downloading the new image, right? So as you can see, this is an OVF file. If I just expand this, and that means you just need to double click on it, and it's going to bring up the VirtualBox page here. Now, in my case, I have various virtual machines, but in your case, you won't have any if this is your first time using VirtualBox. And this is going to prompt you to import the virtual appliance, where you can specify the various options. You can actually take a look at the various options here, and it'll actually point out the directory to which the actual the virtual disk image will be stored, or the virtual machine disk right over here. And you want to specify wherever you want to store your virtual machine, and then click on import. In my case, I already have my Kali VM set up here, and it's already updated to version 2020.2. So that's the latest version as of recording this video. And you can pretty much use one virtual image, and again, you can then just keep on updating it and upgrading as you feel is appropriate. All right. And the other great thing about VirtualBox is the ability to take snapshots. Now, this is not exclusive to VirtualBox when generally speaking about hypervisors, but it's very important that you take a snapshot of your virtual machine. And what this does, it preserves that state in which you actually set up your VM in that pristine state. And whenever you make a mistake or there's an issue with the operating system or the virtual machine, you can easily roll back to that particular snapshot. So in my case, you can see I have a snapshot called Kali Linux 2020.2 rolling, and that is a snapshot that I can always revert to in the event something does happen in my current state, which, as you can see, is changed. So again, to take a snapshot, you can just right click here on, and you want to make sure that you click on this little menu here, and then that will allow you to view the details of the VM, which is pretty much the page you should be seeing. If you go to snapshots, you'll be able to take a snapshot of your current state. In my case, I've already done that, so I won't be doing that. As for your settings, you can pretty much assign as much system resources as you can. I would recommend about 2 GB per virtual machine. And the most important is the network settings, where you want to ensure that this is on the bridged adapter, and you want to specify your actual interface here, or your network interface card. In my case, it's a Realtek PCIe network interface. So I'll just hit OK, and we're ready to go. And then I can just click on start. That's going to start up my virtual machine. And if I just minimize that for a second and we'll go to details, the default credentials for the virtual image are actually added as a description here. So you can see the default username is root and the default password is Tor. All right, so now that we have that set up, we can actually just open up the VM here, and it's currently starting up. So I'll just get that set up immediately. And in the next set of videos, we're going to be taking a look at setting up our virtual environments, and then we'll take a look at installing some of the important tools we'll be using to perform penetration tests on Windows. All right, so we'll just give this a few seconds, and that's going to start up Kali Linux for us. In my case, I've already changed the password, so I'll just enter my root username, and I'll just enter the password to which I changed it to. So that's the first thing you want to do after a default setup of your virtual image. It's going to give you a default installation with the default credentials of root and Tor. So you want to open up your terminal here. In my case, I'll just do that right now. And I'll just open up bash here. And the first thing you want to do is hit password, and you want to hit enter, and that's going to allow you to change your Linux password here for the root user or the user that you're currently logged in as. In my case, I'll just enter a new password, and there we are. The password is updated successfully, and you have now changed the default root password. So that's going to be it for this video. In the next set of videos, we'll get started with our virtual environments, and then after that, we'll take a look at installing the various tools that we're going to be using on Kali Linux. So I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at setting up our own virtual hacking lab and setting up our targets and our virtual hacking lab network. Alright, now in the previous video, we've already taken a look at setting up our attacker VM, which is running Kali Linux, right? And regardless of what operating system you're running as your host, it could be Windows, Mac, or Linux. Once you've set up your hypervisor, in this case, it's going to be VirtualBox, everything should be replicable on your side. Now, our target operating systems for this particular course are going to be Windows 7, and this can be any version and any service pack of Windows 7, and Metasploitable 3. Now, Metasploitable 3 is an intentionally vulnerable operating system that is set up to help users and students understand how to exploit Windows systems or Windows server systems and the various services that are running on it. Now, Metasploitable 3 is a virtual machine that is based on Windows Server 2008. All right, and if I open up my browser here and we go to the GitHub link to Metasploitable 3, which will be added as a resource to this video, you can find it under github.com rapid7 Metasploitable 3. And this page will essentially have all the build instructions to help you build it, and you have the requirements here to actually go through the build process. So you need VirtualBox, you need the Vagrant Reload plugin and Packer, and you also have the build instructions here. Now we also have our own build instructions and a video tutorial that is available for free on YouTube that will actually cover how to set up Metasploitable 3 for yourself. Now, you might be asking yourself, why do we need to do this manually? And the reason for that is because you're dealing with a Windows operating system, and Windows has very strict licensing terms in terms of how you can distribute the operating systems and under what terms. Now, for this particular course, we're going to be providing you with the OVF file, which is the open source virtualization format file, which again is just the VM image, so you don't have to go through the build process yourself. So that will also be added as a resource to this video. And you just need to double click on that and it'll set up the VM for you, as we did with the Kali Linux VM. All right. So you can go through the build instructions if you want to build it yourself based on the operating system you're using. The OVF file will work on any operating system as long as you have VirtualBox installed. All right. And our second operating system, as I said, is going to be Windows 7. Now, as of recording this particular video, Windows 7 is now discontinued. And as a result, Windows does not offer any evaluation images on their website. So before, you had your TechNet Evaluation Center where you could download various Windows 7 virtual machines, and you could use them for a period of 90 days until they were deactivated. Now, for the purpose of this video, you can find your various Windows ISOs under windowsiso.net. And again, this is just public disclosure. Again, you can it's entirely up to you as to whether you want to use this, but these are not activated versions of Windows. So there is going to be a certain period of time where they're going to be running as not activated, which is perfectly fine. That's because these exploits do not need an activated version of Windows to actually run, or you do not need an activated version of Windows to actually use the operating system for exploitation purposes. All right. In my case, because I'm actually carrying out a demonstration here, I have licensed versions of Windows, and again, that is part of Microsoft terms. If I'm going to be using their products for demonstration purposes, I need to be activated. So I just want to make that clear as possible. All right. And you can download the ISO here. Now, I already have the VM images. So if I go to my files here and go into my VMs and ISO files, I already have my Windows 7 VirtualBox file here, which I can easily set up. I already have Windows 7 set up in VirtualBox already. So these are the OVF files. So all you need to do is just double click on them and they'll ask you to import it, and that's all. And as I said, we already have one set up for Metasploitable 3, which will be added, and you can use that for yourself. It's about 6 gigabytes, which is a large download, but again, it is a requirement for this particular course. So again, you just double click on it and that'll give you various instructions to import the VM. So you specify the actual import directory and you should be good to go. All right, so once we have that set up, we can now begin setting up our virtual hacking lab network. All right, so to do that, we want to open up VirtualBox here and we want to go into our preferences. Now, I already have one of my own networks set up, so I will just get rid of this. So I'll just delete that and I'll just hit remove. All right, so within the network preferences here, we want to create our own NAT network. Now, the reason we're doing this is because we want all our VMs in our hacking lab to be on the same network so that they can communicate with each other, to have the same subnet essentially, and it will help them be identified much more easily. So again, we want to create one, and you want to click on this little green plus button here, and we can then edit it. So we can right click and click on edit NAT network, and we want to change the name to something that we'll recognize. So we'll just call it a virtual hacking lab, right? And for the network CIDR and subnet, we're just going to change this to 10. So we'll just get rid of this. So we'll say 10.0.0.1/24. So this is going to be our network address here again, and we have our subnet. So this is a medium-sized network, and we want to ensure that it supports DHCP. So that is going to set up the VirtualBox DHCP service, which is going to be responsible for assigning new IP addresses to new devices that we add to the network. All right, so I'm just going to hit OK. And we just want to hit, we have some invalid settings here. Looks like we have an invalid setting with the actual CIDR. Let me just check what the incorrect options are. So I'll just set that to 0 and we'll just hit OK. And that should be OK now. So ensure that that is set to 0. That's because we are starting off fresh there. All right, so I'm just going to hit OK. And the first virtual machine we want to add to the network is going to be our Kali operating system, or our VM. We want to click on that. We want to go into network, and we want to specify the NAT network. So not on the bridge network anymore. We're going to click on NAT network, and we want to make sure that the network name is Virtual Hacking Lab, similar to what we had set up just a few seconds ago. The next operating system is going to be Metasploitable 3. You want to go into your network settings and again ensure that it is on the Virtual Hacking Lab network here under NAT network. And again, we'll do the same for Windows 7. And in my case, I'm running Windows 7 Enterprise. We're going to go into network and ensure that it's on the NAT network and it's under Virtual Hacking Lab, and we're ready to go. So now we can essentially test this and start noting down the actual IP addresses and test whether we can communicate. We can actually connect to each other from, we can actually establish a connection between these boxes now that they're on the same network. So I'll just click on start now. And this is these network settings are only going to affect the virtual machines that are currently set up to use that network. In our case, we've only set up Kali, Windows 7, and Metasploitable 3. So we're just going to start up Kali here, and Metasploitable 3 as well. We'll also start up the Windows 7 box. And the reason I'm going to be starting up Metasploitable 3 is because there are a few settings you need to set up, or that you need to know, so that you can actually log in and we can test out the IP configuration here. So that is Windows 7 starting up, and we also have Metasploitable 3, which is a Windows Server 2008 box. Let's check up on Kali, because I want to actually get started with Kali first. So Kali is still loading. And again, based on the amount of system resources you have, you do not need to have all the virtual machines running at the same time. You can just run both of them. So you can run Kali and the operating system you're going to be testing on. So we're going to type in the credentials here for Kali, and we're going to let that start up. And I'll just open up a terminal. We'll check if the other boxes are started up. All right, so Metasploitable 3 is started up, and as you can see, it's running on Windows Server 2008 R2. And to log in, it's going to ask you to press Control Alt and Delete. And to do that, you're going to go into your input settings and keyboard and Control Alt Delete. You then want to click on the Vagrant user. So that is going to be automatically set up. Do not be worried. This is how this virtual machine is set up. The password for the Vagrant user is Vagrant, right? And you may have noticed that we have an administrator user. We do not know the credentials to the administrator user. And that's because, as I said, this virtual machine is set up to be intentionally vulnerable, to teach you how to exploit a Windows system. And you'll be able to actually get those credentials at the end of the exploitation process. All right, so that is set up. We now want to check out Windows 7, which is also set up. And as I said, all my versions are activated. Yours do not need to be activated. The reason mine are activated is because I'm going to be demonstrating. I am going to be using the operating systems for demonstration. I need to be in tune with Microsoft licensing terms. All right, so let us check out the various IP addresses that have been assigned to these boxes now that they're on the same network. And I'm just going to use bash here. And I'll say ifconfig on Linux, and you can see it tells us that the IP address is 10.0.0.4, right? And you can actually take a look at the net mask, which is set up correctly, and that's perfectly fine as well. And yeah, that's for the Kali box. So the Kali IP address is 10.0.0.4. Let's check out the Metasploitable 3 IP. So type in ipconfig. And that is set up as 10.0.0.6, 10.0.0.6, there we are. And the default gateway is set up as 10.0.0.1. For Windows 7, let us check this right now. I'll just open up a command prompt here and type in ipconfig. And this is running on 10.0.0.5. So again, because we have the DHCP server set up, that means that these addresses are going to be assigned automatically. You can also assign the addresses manually. You can also then disable DHCP if you want a static network. So what we can do now is we can use nmap. So again, we say nmap, we can type in nmap sn to perform a ping scan, and we can say 10.0/24, and we're essentially just going to perform an entire network discovery scan here that will actually see if we can communicate with all the devices on the network. And immediately you can see we're looking for the VirtualBox network interface cards here. 10.0.5 is Windows 7, 10.0.0.6 is Metasploitable 3, and our Kali OS runs on 10.0.0.4. So that's a good sign. That tells us that we are able to communicate with all the other virtual machines on this network. Again, you can use a tool like NetDiscover for network discovery, and if I specify my interface name, which is Ethernet 0, you can find your interface name by typing in ifconfig, like so, and you can find that right over here. So this is Ethernet 0. So again, I type in NetDiscover Ethernet 0. And that is going to start performing the scan. Now, don't worry if the actual network address here is different from the one we set up. We're using NAT, which means it's network address translation, which means we'll actually be able to discover any hosts on the actual network that we're running on. So we're going to give this a few seconds so it goes through the entire subnet here and all the class B and C networks. And we'll just give this a few seconds. So I'll just get back to you when we've discovered all the devices or all the VMs that are currently on the network. All right, so the scan is complete. And as you can see, it tells us what we already know. We have, of course, apart from our Kali operating system, we have two. We have Windows 7 Metasploitable 3 that are currently detected here. So the address is 10.0.0.5 and 10.0.0.6. Now, again, if you want to specify your own range when using a tool like NetDiscover, you can easily do that by typing in NetDiscover. And we specify our interface, which is going to be Ethernet 0, and then the range. So we say 10.0.0.0/24. So that's the entire network range. And this will make the scan a whole lot faster. So you can actually see, because it's only going through that entire network range, you can see it's already finished, and it should list out the devices that are currently online. In this case, it's currently telling us that we did not get any results. So it's not actually returning any results. So we'll just give that a few seconds. All right, so the scan is complete, and as you can see, that actually completed quite quick, and it now gives us all the IP addresses in ordered fashion. So we have our Windows box right over here and Metasploitable 3 box. And we now know that all the machines on the network can communicate with each other successfully. All right, so now that we've taken a look at how to set up our virtual hacking lab, we're now going to be taking a look at setting up the various tools that we're going to be using, and the tools that are tailored towards Windows penetration testing. So I'll be seeing you there. Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you how to set up your Windows 10 VM, which is fairly simple. Now, given that Microsoft has deprecated all previous versions of Windows and all their VMs, the only version that's currently available is Windows 10 Enterprise, and that is under developer.microsoft.com. under English US, Windows, Downloads, and under Virtual Machines. And again, the various packages that are available are for all the various types of virtualization software or hypervisors that are currently out there. We have VMware, Hyper-V, VirtualBox, and Parallels. And the downloads are about 20 gigabytes. Now we will be using Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows Server 2008 for this course, and we'll be using them to different extents, basically to demonstrate the nuances based on the different versions of Windows and how things change in terms of exploitation and privilege escalation. And you can then download the version that suits you. I would recommend downloading the VirtualBox version, and again, it gives you some basic information regarding this version of Windows. And again, it gives you an expiry date that you can actually keep track of. And again, this is totally free, given that this is a trial version of Windows. Now, in my case, I already have set up my Windows 10 virtual machine, and I'm currently using a licensed version. Again, primarily because of the reason that was mentioned in the earlier videos. I'm currently using this version of Windows for demonstration, and that requires me to have an actual license as opposed to a trial version. So again, just make sure you download the VirtualBox image right over here, and again, it'll simply be an OVA file that you can then run and set up Windows that way. Ensure that you have it enabled on your virtual hacking lab network. So you can see I have Windows 10 Pro right over here. If I go into my settings, ensure that you have it on a network and make sure that it is set to your NAT network under virtual hacking lab. I'm going to enable that right now. And make sure that is the same for your Windows 7 boxes and any other boxes that you have running. In my case, Windows 7 Enterprise. And we also have the Metasploitable 3 box right over here. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.
Did you know that you can be part of the lucrative cybersecurity industry? Even top companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Facebook, and Dell all hire cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity industry has a 0% unemployment rate. The average salary for an entry-level cybersecurity job is about $100,000 per year in the United States. Furthermore, you don't need to know coding and learn from your home, and you get a scholarship to kickstart your career. Apply now. EC Council is pledging a $3.5 million CCT scholarship for cybersecurity career starters. Scan the QR code on the screen to apply for the scholarship. Fill out the form.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Windows Pen Testing Essentials course. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at host discovery with Nmap. Now, in the previous section, we actually took a look at how to create our virtual hacking lab, which is a NAT network. And we very briefly took a look at how to actually perform host discovery with a utility called NetDiscover. However, we're going to be using a very, very powerful tool called Nmap, which allows us to perform a variety or a plethora of things or tasks in regards to scanning our network. One of them is host discovery. Now, in the following videos, we'll talk about performing service version detection, operating system detection, scanning for vulnerabilities, etc., etc. Now, the current virtual machine we're going to be using in this particular module is going to be Metasploitable 3, and we're going to be scanning it, and I'll be showing you how to perform the various types of scans with Nmap. So this video is going to be focused on host discovery, which is really, really simple. So our job now is to actually discover what IP address the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine is on. Now, with Nmap, you can pretty much run a variety of scans to test if the device is online, but the one I'm going to be showing you is the ping option. And then, of course, you can also run the don't ping option, which is great if you don't want to perform host discovery, but you want to perform discovery by actually performing a port scan, which I don't recommend if you're still in the scanning phases. So again, to perform our scan, all we're going to do is type in Nmap, and I'll then say SN, that is the ping option. And then we provide our network IP address or subnet, and we can specify individual IP addresses. So for example, I can say 10.0.0.1, which is the gateway, the default gateway or the router IP address, and we can hit enter. And you can see it will tell us right over here, Nmap scan report for the IP. The host is currently up. Now you can see the very important thing with the ping only option is it does not perform port scanning, which is very important. So that means that this is going to be very, very useful and effective for scanning targets and discovering whether they're currently online. So to scan an entire network subnet, we simply say nmap sn/24. That was the subnet that we had created, and again we can specify the actual subnet range, or we can specify the range of IP addresses. So I can say 10.0.0.1 to 255, and that'll scan the entire range of 254 IP addresses, whereas also by using the /24 option will scan the 254 IP addresses. So this is going to scan our virtual hacking lab network. We're going to hit enter. We're going to give that a few seconds, and there we are. You can see immediately we get our results, and with the ping scan, it is only going to perform the scan. It's only going to display the actual devices or the hosts that are currently up. All right, so for example, we have the default gateway or the router, and it tells us that that is up. We have the DHCP server running on 10.0.0.2, which is also up. And then, of course, we have 10.0.0.6 and 10.0.0.9. Now, if we check our current IP address, at least in my case, you can see that the Kali virtual machine is currently on 10.0.0.9. So that means that the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine is currently active on 10.0.0.6. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to take you through how you can also run the don't ping option, which again is very useful if host discovery is being blocked by a firewall or by a packet filtering system. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'll just clear that out, and we will try the same now. But since we know the IP address of the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine, all we do is we're going to say nmap, and we use the pn option. So that is uppercase P and lowercase n. And this is going to avoid any type of host discovery. Remember, it's not going to check if the host is up. It's going to start targeting ports. So we're going to say pn, and we're going to specify the IP, and I'm just going to hit enter. So we'll give that a few seconds, and the way this works is it's going to perform a simple TCP scan on the ports, and you can see right over here it performs the actual port scan, and it tells us right over here at the bottom, nmap done, 1 IP address scanned and 1 host is up. And of course we know that it's up, so it's going to scan 1,000 of the most common ports that you typically find, and immediately it gives us the port, the state, and the service. So we can see we have port 21, 22, port 80 running, so FTP, SSH, and HTTP, or a web server running respectively. So again, now that we've established what IP address the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine is on, and what IP address it is actually assigned to, we can now move on to the next step, which will involve performing service version detection, operating system detection, etc., so that we can learn more about our target. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at service version detection, operating system detection, and how to perform various types of port scans with nmap. Alright, so now that we've established what IP address our Metasploitable 3 virtual machine is running on, we can now start trying to probe it for more information so that we have a better understanding of what we're dealing with. Now, as I said, we already know that the device is up, and we can now begin with our first step, which is performing port scanning on the target. So if I run a default nmap scan, which is simply typing in nmap and the IP, so that's 10.0.0.6, and I just hit enter, what this scan does, it will scan 1,000 of the most commonly used ports. And when we talk about TCP ports, we have about 65,535 ports in total, and what this scan will do is it'll scan for 1,000 of the most commonly used ports. So that's something that you need to take into consideration very, very closely. All right, so you can see that it'll tell us right over here the host is up, so it performs some form of host discovery based on the responses it's getting back from the ports, because in essence what we're doing is we're sending a SYN packet, right? And if the device responds with an RST packet, or if we don't get a response, again nmap is able to tell, well, is that host up or not? So you can see we scan 1,000 of the most common ports, and it tells us for the rest, which is 990, these are all filtered or closed. So the results we get back are going to be very similar to the results we got back in the previous scan, because we have pretty much not specified the ports that we want to scan. Now, let's talk about port scanning a little bit more. If I wanted to scan 1,000 or 100 of the most commonly used ports, and I can do that by typing in nmap F for and the F means fast. This is a fast scan in that it reduces the amount of ports that you want to scan. We hit enter and we'll give that a few seconds. There we are. That took much less time. And again, this can be used to some extent for host discovery, but there we are. We can see that it tells us the host is up and it scanned 100 of the most common ports and 94 of them are going to be filtered or closed. The rest of them are open, which are actually listed here. So you can see that included in some of the most commonly used ports are going to be, really common services like FTP, SSH, a web server running on port 80 or port 443. You also have an HTTP proxy running on port 8080, so on and so forth. So that is how to specify 100 of the most commonly used ports. Now, if we want to specify a custom range of ports, we can also do that. So if I say nmap, and I say something like, I can use the P option, so that is -P. I can specify a single port, so I can say I only want you to scan port 22. And I hit enter. You can see it will tell us the host is up and it only scans that particular port. Now I can also specify a range of IPs or more than one IP, so I can say port 22 and port 443, right? Which again we can test for. And you use a comma to separate the ports that you want to scan. I'm going to hit enter. Again, we'll give it a few seconds. And there we are. You can see it tells us that port 22 is currently open. However, port 443 is currently filtered. And that could be by through a firewall or a packet filtering system. And essentially that means that it's filtered or closed, which means we really do not have direct access to it, or we can't communicate directly with it. And that's of course the conclusion that nmap has come to. So you can do that, or you can specify a range of ports. So I can say I want to scan ports 21 to port let's see 8080, right? So I want to scan all ports between port 21 and port 8080. You can use the hyphen or the minus key or the symbol here to specify that, and we hit enter, and of course it's going to scan all of those ports. So we'll give it a few seconds. All right, so the scan completes and it gives us the results we were looking for. So you can see it scanned all the ports, which is something you can see about 8,060 ports between port 21 and port 8080, and it gives us all the results right over here. So again, we're getting an idea of what's running on the target. But what if we wanted to scan all 65,535 ports? Well, how would we do that? We can specify port 1 to 65,535. However, what we can do is we can use the -P- option, which means scan all ports. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to enter and let's see what it gives us. All right, so the scan is complete, and you can see that it scans all 65,535 ports, and it tells us that out of those, 65,519 of them are filtered or closed, and it displays the rest of them to us, which is again very, very useful because now we understand entirely what we're dealing with in regards to the services that are running on the target. So now that we've talked about port scanning and how to specify various ports, let's talk about how to enumerate more information from the target. So one of these pieces of information that we're after is the service version that's running. And the service version or the service banner gives us the exact version of the piece of software that is running on each of these ports. For example, if we have an FTP port running or the FTP service running, we want to know what version of FTP is running, and that helps us as pen testers because we can search for potential vulnerabilities or exploits that exist for that particular version, and that helps us understand how to target, how to approach the actual target, and what exploits to use, so on and so forth. And then another piece of information that we're after is what operating system is running on this target, and nmap can do all of that. So to do this, all we need to do is type in nmap, and we can specify, we can combine commands or options with nmap. So let's say I wanted to scan, let's see, I only wanted to scan, we want to run a default scan that will only scan 1,000 of the most common ports. So we'll say nmap, And to scan the service versions, we use the -SV, and the S is lowercase, the V is uppercase, and then we specify the IP address. Like so, and we hit enter. All right, so we're just going to let that give us all the service versions that are currently available. Now, this is going to take longer than a typical port scan because now Nmap is actively trying to probe the actual device, and it's trying to get all the relevant banners so that it can actually, again, understand, or it can actually deduce what versions are running on those particular ports. So again, we'll just let this scan, and I'll get back to you when this is complete. All right, so the scan is complete. You can see it took about 122 seconds. So it's going to take significantly longer, primarily because it's going to try and probe the target more, as I mentioned. So if we take a look at the results now, they're going to be vastly different than the results we got earlier, where we only had the port, where we only had the port, the state, and the service. Now we have the port, state, service, and the version. So that's the additional column that's added here. Now, given that we only scanned 1,000 ports, it's only going to display those results. So you can see, for example, on the FTP port, we have Microsoft FTPD. All right, so now we understand, firstly, that we are running a Windows box directly from that, and it's running FTPD. Really did not get much information out of that. But for example, on the SSH port, we can see we have OpenSSH 7.1. So that can be used again for vulnerability scanning, and we can then potentially find exploits if they exist for this version of OpenSSH. You then have the web server, which is running Microsoft IIS HTTPD 7.5. And then we have custom services like the HTTP proxy that is running Sun, Glassfish, and this is the open source edition. This is version 4. So you can see that's very, very useful information because we can actually enumerate actual versions of software that are running. And then before we actually start targeting the device or performing exploits, we can again structure our attack based on low hanging fruit. So again, these are the actual results returned to us. Now, you can see, for example, here, it tells us that one service was unrecognized despite returning the data, and it actually gives us the fingerprint here. So again, this fingerprint can then be used for future analysis to try and understand what actual service was running here, because Nmap was not able to come to a conclusion as to what was running. All right, so that is service version detection. And again, you can run this. It is recommended that you run this scan on all ports so that it is as comprehensive as possible. So again, we can then use the -P- option. Now let's talk about operating system detection. All right, so the operating system detection is very simple. All we need to do is specify O, so that is a uppercase O, so minus uppercase O, and we'll also include it with service version detection, and we are going to then perform the scan on all the ports, and we are just going to hit enter. So again, it's going to tell me that right over here, so TCP IP fingerprinting for the operating system scan requires root privileges. So if you're a non-root user, you want to make sure you use the sudo command. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to ask me for my password. I'll just paste that in, and the scan is going to complete now. It's going to start now, and I'm just going to wait for this to complete. All right, so as you can see, the scan is complete, and we get the same fingerprint but from before. However, now you can see the results will remain the same regarding service version detection. If we take a look at the bottom here, we have a new section or a new piece of data that's added, and that is operating system details. Now, the way Nmap will do this is based on the responses it's getting from the target. It will come to a conclusion as to what operating system detection, what operating system is running. And of course, it's going to do this through prediction based on the signatures that it currently has stored within its own database or signature file. So you can see that from the operating system details, it tells us that we're running Microsoft Windows Server 2008 or 2008 Beta 3. It also gives us other guesses like Microsoft Windows Server 2008 R2, which we know is actually correct, or Windows 8.1. So typically, this is usually going to be very active in regards to giving you the correct operating system. And again, it gives you a warning right if you're telling you that the OS scan results may be unreliable, and that is because we could not find at least one open port and one closed port. So again, it gives you a bit of an idea as to how Nmap comes to these conclusions. Now, as I said, The most important thing to take a look at are the first 2 or 3 predictions, because they are going to be they're going to be the most correct, or the ones with the highest probability of being the actual operating system running. So in this case, we have a pretty good idea that is running Windows Server 2008. And of course, given that we know Metasploitable 3, we know that it's currently running Windows Server 2008 R2. All right, so that's something that you want to take into consideration. But you can see we have immediately performing just 2 scans, we have been able to get a ton of information from our target. And now that we performed a comprehensive port scan, or that we scanned all the ports, we now have a pretty good idea of what's running on the actual target in regards to service versions and the current open ports. And we also know the operating system that's running, which means we can then start performing or looking for exploits that are targeted or are designed for these particular versions of Windows Server. And of course, we can then target the services. We'll be looking at all of this in later modules of the course. Now, before I actually close off this video, or I end off this video, I just want to take you through some very, very useful tidbits or tips that you can use with Nmap. And one of them that's going to be extremely useful is the ability to output your results into a file. So for example, I'll just head over to my desktop here. And if I open up the man pages for Nmap, and that can be done by simply typing in man Nmap, and I scroll to the bottom here, you can see that if we go right at the bottom to the output here, you can see that we can output our scans to different types of files. And we have a normal output, which is going to be displayed exactly how it displays it onto the terminal. We have XML format, and we have the script kiddie format and the grippable format. The 3 most important formats you're going to be using are going to be normal, XML, and the grippable format, which can then be used with a command line utility like grep. And you have all the options here. So for example, if I wanted to output the file into a normal file, I would use the ON option. If I wanted to output into an XML file, I can use OX. And XML files are useful if you want to parse the information into a web page or into a report. And then of course you have the OG option, which will output into a grippable format. So for example, if I wanted to output a simple scan, so I'll say nmap f, I only want to scan 100 of the most common ports, and I want to perform some service version detection. You can see how I'm combining scans here. It really is fantastic that you can do this with Nmap. And then I provide the IP here, and then I say ON, so that is a minus lowercase o and a uppercase n, and then I specify the actual file name. So I can say nmap .txt, right? If I wanted to output into all formats, I can then simply type in OA, and that'll output it into all file formats. So I can also do that as well. And then I get rid of the extension here, and I just give it a file name. So I just call it nmap scan, and I just hit enter, and that is going to perform the scan. And it's then going to output this scan into these 3 formats, or 3 or 4 formats that we can actually use for generating reports. We can use it for reference or to access later, so that we don't have to keep on running our scans to actually analyze the results time and time again. All right, so again, we'll just let this run. All right, the scan is complete, and again it'll display the information to us on the terminal. But if we list out the files in our current directory, you can see that it outputs into the greppable format, which is gnmap, and then it outputs into the normal nmap nmap output format, and then we have the XML file. So if I cat the contents of nmapscan.nmap, you can see it actually displays exactly what we got on the terminal. So this is again just human readable information. You then of course have the XML output, so I can just say nmap scan.xml, and you can see that that is indeed in XML format, which again is very useful for generating reports or for parsing it into the web or into a web page. All right, so that is how to actually specify your output options. And again, I'll just take you through some other really cool features that you can use with Nmap. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we'll just run the same scan that we ran before, and let's talk about verbosity in terms of what is outputted to you on the screen. So when we talk about what is output to us on the screen, you can see that when we hit enter without specifying the amount of verbosity, Nmap does not display anything to us, any diagnostic information to us as the user. If we want Nmap to actually display and to actually state what's going on in the background before it actually delivers the results, we can use the -v option, and that is lowercase v. So that is level 1 of verbosity. We can also use level 2 and level 3 to give us more information. So again, if we can run that command the way it is. However, if I just open up the man pages and I grep and I say I'm looking for, let's see, let me just use the expression option, and I'm looking for verbose, right? So I can say verbose, hit enter. You can see that if we take a look at the man pages, we use the normal output in verbose, we use the V option here. And then if I look for verbosity, and just hit enter, you can see that we can increase the verbosity level by using more V's. So we can specify more V's. So again, you can also do this by specifying V1, V2, V3, etc. In my case, I really like using just 1 or 2 V's. It just gives me just enough diagnostic information that I need. So again, I can just hit enter. And now you can see it's actually displaying what's going on in the background and how Nmap is coming to its conclusions, and the results are being delivered to us live. And then once the scan is done, it'll give us the information that it actually was able to get. So you can see right over here, it starts the DNS resolution and then completes parallel DNS resolution. And then it initiates the connect scan, the TCP connect scan. And you can see it discovers an open port on port 8080. It discovers an open port on port 80, port 22, port 21, so on and so forth. And then it's going to move on to the next stage, which is service version detection. So it actually runs the scan chronologically or in order. So you can see, first of all, it actually performs some host discovery. So it initiates a ping scan. It then performs your parallel DNS resolution. It then goes on to scanning for ports, which is we specify the F option. So only 100 of the most common ports. We then move on to service version detection. So it's going to scan 6 services, and then it's going to essentially going to output the results to us. And immediately it did that for us right over here. So now we have an additional column that is called the reason column, which actually tells us the reason it was actually able to come to these conclusions. In this case, we got a SYN-ACK in return. This particular scan utilizes a TCP connect scan, which again will typically utilize the TCP three-way handshake, where Nmap will send a TCP SYN packet, and then based on the response, if it gets a SYN-ACK, it means that particular port is open. If the port is closed, it will get an RST or a reset packet telling Nmap that is closed. So again, that's just a few tips that you can use in the event you want to learn more about Nmap, or you're trying to understand what's happening behind the scans or in the back end. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Pen Testing Essentials course. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to perform firewall detection and evasion with Nmap. Now, as I mentioned in the previous section, we are going to be dealing primarily with Windows systems, and one thing that all Windows operating systems, whether we're talking about Windows Server, Windows 2000 and Windows 2008 to 2016, 2012, or we're talking about desktop editions or Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 8.1, all of them have one thing in common, and that is they have Windows Firewall in place, right? Now, Windows Firewall can be, again, an issue depending on the way it's configured. Now, the first thing we need to do as any pen tester is we need to understand if we actually have a firewall running and if the firewall is active. And the easiest way we can do that with Nmap is by running or by performing an ACK probe scan. Now, an ACK probe scan works very differently. It works very differently and counterintuitively to how the default TCP three-way handshake is initiated and again how it is completed in terms of the sequence. What we're doing now, instead of sending your simple SYN packet to your target, we're now going to send a packet with only the ACK probe or the ACK flag set, and doing this will allow us to determine whether the target is actually being filtered by a firewall, or whether it's being protected by a firewall, or whether it really is not being protected by a firewall, or the firewall isn't active. and we can easily run this on any target. And what I'm going to do now is I'll open up the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine here, and I will just open up Windows Firewall here. So I'll say Windows Firewall, and we'll open up, there we are, and we will say I want to turn Windows Firewall on or off. So I'll turn it off just for a second. I just want to show you something. So I will turn it off, and I'll open up my Kali virtual machine again, and we'll run the ACK-Probe scan. So we say nmap, and we can specify the ports that we're interested in, but in this case I'll just leave it to the default. So I can say nmap, and we say SA, so lowercase s, uppercase A, and the target IP. We hit enter. It's going to say we require root privileges, so I'm just going to provide them. And there we are. I'm just going to hit enter, and again we'll just let the scan complete, and you can see immediately it tells us that the host is up, so it performs host discovery. We then can see that it tells us all 1000 scanned ports on the target are unfiltered. So that means that all 1000 ports are not being protected or are not being filtered by a firewall. All right, now that's because we've disabled the firewall. But just to prove to you that this scan does work, I will reactivate the firewall. So I'll open up Metasploitable 3 here again, and I'll say turn Windows Firewall on or off. I'll turn it on for both public and private networks, and I'll just hit OK here, and we'll go back into Kali, and I'll run that one more time just to show you. So I'll hit enter, and we can compare the results. You can see for one, the actual scan is taking longer, so that's an indication that something has changed. So again, we'll just let the scan complete here. So there we are. It should take just a few more seconds. Again, it's going to take significantly longer than the actual than a scan where you don't have a firewall in place. But again, this is one of the great things about Nmap, is the ability to detect whether we have a firewall up or not. So you can see in this case, we now get the same scan results. The host is up, but instead of telling us that the ports are unfiltered, we can now see it tells us that all 1000 scan ports on the target are filtered, which means there is a firewall in place, and this may hinder your scans. All right, so now that we've taken a look at how to detect firewalls with Nmap using the ACK-Probe, we can now take a look at some common firewall evasion techniques. All right, so let's get started with that. So the first thing we are going to be taking a look at is one of the most common techniques that has been used for quite a while, and that is the ability to actually fragment your packets into smaller 8-byte packets, right? So to do this, all we need to do is we need to say, if we are running a simple scan here, we can say fragment, and we can use the minus lowercase f, that means fragment, and this will fragment it into 8-byte packets. And of course, you can analyze this yourself. And again, the whole idea behind reducing the size of the packets is to fragment a packet so that when it's passing through a firewall, the firewall is not able to detect what's actually being sent to the target, because it's all in fragments, as opposed to a single packet that contains information that the firewall might flag as malicious, right? So if we say nmap f, and we can then specify our own types of scans like nmap f sv, specify a fast scan here, and then we can type in the target IP here. So I say hit enter again. You can see it's going to tell me the frag scan requires root privileges, so I'll just hit sudo, and I'll just hit enter now one more time. So again, we'll just let that run. Now, one of the issues that you'll have with fragmentation is fragmentation was really used on older firewalls. So again, it can be used on a few old legacy Windows systems. It also is very effective. I've tested this myself on Windows Server 2008 system, so you can use this again for very basic level of evasion. So again, we're just going to let this scan run, and then we're going to take a look at performing a SYN scan, or a stealth scan as it's known. And then we'll also talk about decoys and specifying your MTU as an additional option as well. All right, so as you can see, we get our results back, and again, we get the exact same results we would have gotten And again, the fragmentation really didn't make much of a difference apart from slowing down the scan, because remember, we're fragmenting the packets into smaller pieces, which means the requests are going to be fragmented and then they need to be sent to the target where they're reassembled and then interpreted, and then a response is sent back. So again, that is fragmentation in a nutshell. It's a very basic technique that's used. Now let's talk about one of the most important types of scans, and that is your SYN or your stealth scan. If I just clear up my terminal here, so I'll say man, and I'll say man nmap, and I hit enter, you can see that I'll look for the SYN scan, and we're looking for the first option that is denoted by a -s, one lowercase and uppercase s. So the SYN scan is the default and most popular scan option for good reasons. It can be performed quickly, scanning thousands of devices as stealthily as possible, because it never completes TCP connections. All right, so this is the de facto scan that you should be running, primarily because it scans very quickly, because it is essentially splitting the TCP three-way handshake in half. And secondly, it's going to be extremely stealthy because a firewall is looking for, it's looking for the complete TCP three-way handshake. And if you cut it in half, then it's really not going to be able to detect what's going on exactly, because I'll explain it to you very basically. What's happening is instead of completing the TCP three-way handshake where you send your SYN packet, and then you wait for a response from the target, which could either be a SYN ACK if the device is up, and then you respond with an ACK. What we're doing here is we are sending a SYN, and then we wait for a response, and then irregardless of the response, we simply send a reset packet back to the device, and we're essentially splitting it in half, making the scan shorter and stealthier. To run this scan, all we need to do is type in nmap ss, so again minus lowercase s and uppercase s, and then we specify our ports. Again, I'll just use the 100 most common ports, and we can then specify our target or any other options that we would like. So for example, I can say I want service version detection and a bit of operating system detection, so 10.0.0.6, and we can then hit enter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to demonstrate this to you with Wireshark, right? So Wireshark is a traffic analyzer and inspector. It allows us to analyze packets being sent and received from our target, and I'll just specify my Ethernet 0 interface here. So I'm just going to start the scan, and it's going to say it requires root privileges, so I'll provide that with root privileges here. So sudo, we're just going to hit enter, and if I open up Wireshark and I start the capture now, you can see we have all of these SYN packets being sent to the target. So again, I'll just wait for the actual scan to complete. Let's see if that's actually running here. There we are. It's running, and I'll just try and zoom in here. Let me just try and zoom into the actual traffic being captured. There we are. So I can now spread this out, and I'll just say I want my info right over here. So you can see we are sending our SYN packets right over here, SYN. We then get a SYN ACK back from the target. You can see the IP 10.0.0.6 is the source, and the destination is our IP. We get a SYN ACK, so that means that these ports are going to be open. So both port 21 and 22 are open. You can see that's specified right over here. We can also open this up. You can see the source port and the destination port are also listed right over here. All right, so that is how we can actually that is essentially how this scan works, by sending SYN packets. So I just wanted to demonstrate that to you so that you have an understanding. So I'll just close this here. I don't want to save the packets, and there we are. The scan is complete. And because we used the stealth scan, for one, you can actually tell how much faster that scan was, and we get all the results we were looking for. So there we are. We're able to get our operating system detection, service version detection, so on and so forth. All right, so that is how to use the SYN scan, or the stealth scan as it's known. Let's talk about a few other techniques. One of the techniques that I want to show to you, which is really cool, is the ability to use the decoy. Now, a decoy is exactly what it's exactly what it states it is. It is essentially using an IP address or a decoy IP address to perform your scan. So, for example, if we are on a network that we are not supposed to have access to, and we have a firewall running or an intrusion detection system that is running and actively monitoring the network, if we try and initiate a scan on a target that we know we do not have permission to do so, that will be flagged as a malicious activity, irregardless of how we actually try and make it as stealthy as possible. So what we can do is we can actually use another IP or another set of IPs as decoys to actually trick any intrusion detection system or firewall into thinking that the scan is coming from another IP address, which is absolutely brilliant. So to do this, we have multiple ways we can do this. We can actually, again, specifying it is very simple. So again, if I wanted to say nmap, and we can run any type of scan that we want, we can say nmap, we want to run a stealth scan, and we want to run it on all 100 most commonly used ports. If I want to use a decoy, I use the -D option. Now, when we talk about specifying a decoy, we can specify random decoys. And to do this, we can say RND, sorry, that is capital RNDs for random. We then use the colon and we specify the amount of random IP addresses that we want to use, and Nmap will generate them automatically. This is great, and I'll show you why in a second. So if I say I want to use only 3 random IP addresses as our decoy, and we specify the target IP here, I'll open up Wireshark just to show you that 3 other IPs are using apart, and these are not going to be our IP address or our Kali Linux IP. So again, I'll open up a new tab here, and if I list out the IP address of the Kali virtual machine, you can see the IP is 10.0.0.9. So just keep that in mind as we run this scan. So again, I'll just start the capture and I'll hit enter. It's going to tell me it requires root privileges. I'll provide it with those root privileges. And we'll just capture a bit of traffic here. The scan is complete, and we'll stop the capture. So if we go to the top here and we take a look at the SYN requests being sent, you can see that the source IP address is not our IP address at all. It's going to be these 3 IP addresses that are going to be used, and you can see them being repeated frequently. So for example, you can see the sequence is repeated after every SYN packet has been sent. So it sends one with 208.166.217. It then moves on to 196.162, and then 208.249, and then it repeats again. So 208.166, 196.162, 208.249. So you can see that really is brilliant, because we can mask our activity as other IP addresses, which is great. So if you're on a private network that, again, you want to be as clandestine as possible, you can also make it look like the scan is coming from an authorized system on the network. So for example, if there is an administrator on the network, you can actually spoof their IP address to make it look like the scan is coming from their IP address, which is brilliant. So again, we can do the same thing. We say nmap, and I'll say we want to run a stealth scan. We're going to run it on all 100 most common ports, and we can then specify our decoy, and then we specify the IP we want to use as our decoy. In this case, let's make the scan look like it's coming from the actual access point or the gateway or the router IP address. So you can say 10.0.0.1, and then we specify the actual IP address of the target, 10.0.0.6. I'll hit enter. And again, it's going to ask me for root privileges. I keep forgetting to provide it with root privileges. We will start a new capture here. So continue without saving, and I'm going to hit enter, and we let that go. We'll let that continue scanning, and there we are. The scan is complete, and you can see right over here, it keeps sending its SYN packets with the source IP of 10.0.0.1. And again, it really is brilliant that the fact that you can actually mask your IP address or use a decoy IP address to make it look like the scan is coming from another device on the network, or another device that is on the internet or that is not part of the network. Really is brilliant. So these are the tactics primarily that I wanted to show you in regards to firewall detection and evasion. So that's pretty much going to be all that I wanted to cover in this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be taking you through how to perform service enumeration with Nmap scripts or the Nmap scripting engine. for that matter. So let's get started. The first thing I want to take you through is, of course, performing a default Nmap script scan. So again, what I can do is I can just open up the Nmap man pages. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to explain a few things. So I can just actually open it up directly because I know the actual location of what I am going to be taking you through. So if we take a look at, we've already taken a look at host discovery to a certain extent, and we're going to be taking a look at the script scan. So there we are. You can see that we have the SC option. So that is minus lowercase s and uppercase c. This will use the default Nmap scripts within the default Nmap script directory. Now, when we talk about Nmap scripts, let me explain what they are. If we go onto the Nmap website, that is at nmap.org, under the book, and we have the manual page, you can see that the Nmap scripting engine is one of Nmap's most powerful and flexible features. It allows users to write and share simple scripts using the Lua programming language to automate a wide variety of networking tasks. These scripts are executed in parallel with the speed and efficiency you would expect from Nmap. And again, these scripts are used to perform a wide variety of networking tasks, as they've just mentioned here. So the type of functionality that you can do are defined, or the type of functions that that a script can do are defined in terms of categories, and the categories are auth, broadcast, default, discovery, DOS, exploit, external, fuzzer, intrusive, malware, safe, version, and vuln. All right. So you can open up the script categories to actually take a look at the various categories of scripts that you have. Now, when we take a look at the default script category, you can see that these scripts are the default set and are run when the SC option or the A option, which is the aggressive scan, is invoked. And again, that allows you to run the default category. Now, this is typically what you'd run by default, and I'll be taking you through scripts manually and explaining how they work and what they can do. Now, when we talk about Nmap, your scripts are typically going to be stored under your user share Nmap directory under scripts. So if I hit enter, it will display all the scripts that are currently available to us that we can use. Now, these are not going to be sorted into functionality, rather the protocol or the service version they are associated to. So for example, if we say we have various SMB scripts here, you can see that this SMB script will check for SMB2 capabilities, and it has the extension NSE. Now, these scripts are again programmed in the Lua scripting language. So that means you can actually take a look at these scripts, you can interact with them, you can develop your own, so on and so forth. And mainly scripts are just used to automate things that you typically do manually. And again, with the various categories, these scripts can do a lot of things, from performing authentication to performing brute forcing, performing exploitation, testing for certain vulnerabilities, so on and so forth. So for example, we can scroll all the way to the top here. You can see we have various HTTP scripts that scan for particular vulnerabilities, and the various CVE codes are listed here. So on and so forth. So again, using these scripts is very simple. If we talk about the basic usage first, we can invoke the default category of scripts to be run by typing in Nmap and then using the SC option, right? We can do that, or we can use the A option. Now, the A option refers to an aggressive scan. Now, an aggressive scan combines three types of scans together. The aggressive scan combines the service version detection, it combines the aggressive scan, and then combines the default Nmap script scan. So this is an extremely comprehensive scan to use, and all you need to do is specify the A option. So we can actually do that, and that will combine service version detection with operating system detection. That is operating system detection and the default script scan right over here. So again, we can just use the Nmap A option, and we will combine it with the SYN or the stealth scan, and then we can provide the ports. So we'll just run it again on the 100 most common ports so that we don't have to waste any time, because when we include additional type of options in our scan, like the script scan, it's going to take more time. We'll talk about timing in a later video. So we can then provide out the IP of the target here. So I can say 10.0.0.6 and we hit enter. It's going to say we require root privileges. We're going to provide it with root privileges. And again, we're just going to wait for this scan to complete. Alright, as you can see, the scan completes and we now have a plethora of new information that's being given to us just by including the default script or the default Nmap script option. So you can see that in addition to the results that we typically get in regards to the port, the state of the port, what service and the service version, at the bottom of that particular service, which is again is going to be indented, you can see that we now have new information. So for example, we have FTP syst here. Now FTP syst, this is in reference to the FTP syst script. So it's actually listing out what script was used to scan, and what the FTP syst script does is it actually just displays the actual system that is being used, or the actual operating system on which this FTP server is being run. In this case, it tells us that Windows NT is being used. So you can see that this FTP script is giving us valuable information regarding what operating system is running. You then have the SSH host key script, which is running under SSH, and that essentially just gives us the SSH host key, not really that important information. And then you have the port 80, which is a web server. And then for the port 80 or for the web server, you can see that it runs 3 scripts by default. It runs the HTTP method script. It runs the HTTP server header, which tells us the actual server header or the server side technology being used. In this case, it's Microsoft IIS 7.5. And then the HTTP title that's being used. In this case, it tells us that the site doesn't have a title. So immediately we're getting tons of more important information regarding our targets. And if we take a look at the proxy, you can see that just uses the HTTP title script here, and that tells us that we have Glassfish server and the server is running. So that is how to use how to use Nmap scripts, and I've talked about invoking the default Nmap script scan. Now we can also use scripts individually, which is really where I want to demonstrate the power of Nmap, because that's where things get really interesting. So again, if we take a look at our target here, right over here, you can see that we have multiple ports and services, and we have multiple types of scripts that we can run. So again, if I list out the scripts within the Nmap scripts directory, again, this will list out all the scripts that we can use, and again, we can start using these scripts to enumerate more information from our target. So if we are talking about the web server, for example, I can use the HTTP enum script, and the way I can list out all HTTP scripts is I can grep this, I can pipe and grep and say I want to use an expression. We'll say HTTP, and I can then list out all the HTTP scripts that we can use. Now the script that I want to use in regards to HTTP is going to be the HTTP enum script, and I'm going to be taking you through only the most important one, which is the one right over here. So we want to use HTTP enum. To use a single script, it is important that you know what service you're targeting and what service this script is designed to be run on. So in our case, if I say nmap and I can run a stealth scan, to run a single script, I say script, and that is done using 2 minus or 2 dashes, and then we say script, and then we specify the script name. So HTTP enum, right? And then I specify the target, so 10.0.0.6, and I hit enter. It's going to ask me for root privileges. I'm going to provide it with root privileges. So you can see it'll start the scan, and we're just going to let that scan run. And you can see that this is now going to scan all the default ports, which is exactly what I wanted to point out. So if we are only scanning the web server, it only makes sense that we provide only the web server port that we want to target. So we can say, I want you only to target port 80 and port 8080 because we have a proxy running on port 8080. So I'll hit enter, and now you see the scan is much more efficient because we're only scanning the ports that are relevant, and we're using the script that is relevant to those ports. And there we are. So you can see that for port 80, we don't get any important information. HTTP enum simply lists out the directory of that web server. So you can see for the proxy, it gives us a bit of shellcode here, and it tells us that this particular proxy is vulnerable to directory traversal, which is very interesting. So again, it's already revealing potential vulnerabilities within the system, and that is just by invoking one simple HTTP script. Now, as I said, there's tons of HTTP scripts that you can use. One of my favorite is the ability to test and see if we have a web application firewall running, and you can run this against websites to detect if there's a web application firewall running. You can also use the HTTP WAF fingerprint script, which will actually tell you what web application firewall is running, which is fantastic. Now, as I said, we can take a look at tons of scripts that we can run. As I said, by default, you want to run the default Nmap script scan. However, let's talk about a few Windows type scans. Now, given that Metasploitable 3 doesn't have, again, it has SMB ports running, but we can actually take a look at that shortly. Let's take a look at some of the CVEs or Windows exploits that Nmap scripts that we can actually scan for with Nmap scripts. So if I just clear this out right over here, we can actually scan for a popular vulnerability that again is we can use. So again, if I just open up google.com and I search for a vulnerability called MS08, so 2008, so that's 08, and we say 067, right? So 067, and we just open that up. We'll just open up one of these ones right over here, the Microsoft Bulletin, Security Bulletin, and we can open up Rapid7 here. So again, you can see we can take a look at the affected and non-affected software. You can see for Windows, it affects Windows Server 2008. There we are. So again, this vulnerability affects Windows Server 2008. So we can actually run this particular script. So this script is an SMB script. And so what we can do is we can run the same script here. We can say Nmap we'll run a stealth scan, and we'll say we want to we can also fragment the packets because we're dealing with a firewall. If I disable the firewall for a second here, so I'll just say open up this and I just disable the firewall because I do not want to cover that right now. I'm simply explaining how to perform these types of scans. So we can say Nmap SS, we specify the port 445 for SMB, and then we say script. We're looking for SMB. The script name is SMB vuln. And again, you can list out all of the SMB scripts by listing out the directory of the Nmap scripts here. So list user share Nmap scripts, and we can then pipe and grep this, and we're looking for SMB scripts only. So we can hit enter, and now you can see we have all the SMB scripts here. So the one we are targeting is MS08067. So you can actually just copy that directly if you don't want to type it in, or you don't need to remember them directly. So we just specify the script here, and then the IP 10.0.0.6. Now this is a vulnerability scanning script, which is very important. It is going to scan for a particular vulnerability. So immediately you can see that it tells us it does not give us any options here. So what we can do now is we can actually just get rid of the I'll get rid of the stealth scan. We hit enter again. So again, it tells us that it is not, if it does not give us any results, it means that it's not particularly vulnerable to this particular exploit. So again, we can run this against all our Windows machines that we'll be working with, but I just wanted to take you through the basics of Nmap scripts and how to run the default script scan. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to perform vulnerability scanning with Nmap using the Nmap vulners script that comes pre-packaged with Nmap now. I'm currently on the GitHub repository just to give you more information regarding the tool and how it actually does what it does. So as I said, this is going to be focused on vulnerability scanning. So if we take a look at the description of the Nmap vulner script here, you can see it tells you that this script is it uses the default Nmap service version detection system to get banners, and then it uses those banners to perform scans, or it'll actually scan to see if any of those services are vulnerable to a particular exploit, an exploit that has been publicly disclosed. And then it does that and displays the various CVE codes for these vulnerabilities. So again, if a service is vulnerable to a particular exploit, it will list out the CVE code. CVE stands for Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures. And again, it will list out the actual code here, and then it'll also display the severity in the event that, again, you want to know how to structure your attacks, and then it gives you a relevant link that gives you information regarding when the vulnerability was disclosed, so on and so forth. Now, as I said, this script comes prepackaged with all latest versions of Nmap, and using it is very simple. We need to run the default service version detection scan and then run the script vulners here and then provide the target. So we'll do that right now. So again, running it, as I said, is very simple. All we need to do is type in Nmap, and then we say service version detection. We want to perform some service version detection, and we can also run a stealth scan here in conjunction with this, and we can then specify the ports that we want. In this case, I'm just going to specify, we'll say ports 21 to port 8080, or we can simply just run the default port scan, which is 1000 of the most commonly used ports, and then we say script, and then we specify the vulners option right over here. So that's the name of the script. We say vulners, and then we hit 10.0.0.6, which is the actual IP address of the Metasploitable 3 virtual machine, and we hit enter. It's going to ask me for root privileges. I'm going to provide it with root privileges, provide my password, and there we are. So I'm just going to let this scan complete, and I'll get back to you when it's done. All right, the scan is complete, and as you can see, for port 22, which is running SSH, and OpenSSH 7.1, we have various CVEs that are listed here, and we also have their severity. So you can see this is OpenSSH 7.1, and it gives us all the actual CVE codes that we can actually then copy and use for our own research. So again, I can open that up in Google. So paste and go, and that'll take me again to the actual releases. So you can see if I open up Rapid 7 here, Rapid 7 will give us more information regarding this vulnerability and how to exploit it. So you can see it tells us this is an OpenSSH vulnerability, and again it gives you a description of the vulnerability, and then if there is a Metasploit module, it'll actually list out the Metasploit module that you can use to actually exploit this particular service. So again, it's extremely useful in understanding what actual services that are running on the target are vulnerable to publicly known exploits. And again, the addition of having the CVE code is extremely helpful. And you can see for pretty much the only service that we're actually getting the vulner script successfully running or giving us scripts is the SSH port. And of course, that does not mean that the other services running on the system are not vulnerable to any particular exploit, or are not vulnerable to any openly known exploit. It simply just means that the vulner script was not able to come to that particular conclusion using the banners it was able to retrieve. That being said, that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Windows Pen Testing Essentials course. In this video, I'm going to be taking you through Metasploit, or the Metasploit framework. So this is just going to cover the fundamentals of Metasploit. So first of all, what exactly is Metasploit? Well, Metasploit is an exploitation and penetration testing framework that is written in the Ruby programming language and can perform everything specific to a penetration test, all the way from scanning and information gathering to exploitation and privilege escalation. So it really does a lot. And given that it is a comprehensive and inclusive framework, when it comes down to penetration testing, you can pretty much perform your entire penetration test using Metasploit. Now, the aim of this video is to get you up and started and running with Metasploit. And I'm going to be doing it with two ways. Firstly, I'm going to be explaining the structure of the framework and how it works, how everything is sorted out, because it is a fairly complex framework in regards to the way it's been developed. It really is very simple to use. And again, because of its complexity and how it's been managed, it really is beautiful to actually see, and I'll be showing you that shortly. So again, the way Metasploit handles its functionality and the complexity is by the use of modules, or segregating various pieces of functionality into modules, and that'll become clear in a very short period of time. So we're currently in the terminal, and the Metasploit framework comes pre-packaged and pre-installed with Kali or any other pen testing distribution. So you don't need to worry about installing it. Just make sure your distribution is up to date. The first thing we want to do is, let's first of all understand the structure of Metasploit, as I said. So if I list out the contents of, let me just say AL here, and we say the user, share, and we're looking for the Metasploit directory here. So Metasploit, we just use Metasploit framework. There we are. And I list the contents of this directory. And I'll just scroll all the way to the top here. You can see that we have various files, most of which are not really important, but we have various executables like the Metasploit console, which we'll be using shortly. You also have MSF Venom, which is used to create payloads, which again we'll be covering in the next video when we'll be talking about creating payloads that we can then use to get a reverse shell on or a Meterpreter session on. But let's take a look at the modules folder, which is where everything is, everything sort of comes into play in regards to the actual framework and what we'll be interacting with. So if I say cd user share, and we go into the modules directory, I'll just clear that out and we'll list them. You can now see this is the fundamental structure of Metasploit and how its functionality is sorted out. So first of all, you have auxiliary modules. You then have encoders, which pretty much explain what they do. They're used for encoding. You then have evasion modules. You then have exploits, which again are pretty self-explanatory. These are used for exploitation. You then have NOPs, payloads, and post, which is for post exploitation. So you can see that within each of these folders, you'll have all the various modules that deal with that particular piece of functionality or that particular function. So if I'm talking about auxiliary or scanners, you can see if I enter the auxiliary folder here and I just list out, you can see they're then further sorted out based on the actual functionality. So again, we have fuzzers, we have scanners, sniffers, etc., etc. I'm not really going to go deep down into the actual structure of Metasploit. I'm just going to show you how this all comes into play shortly. So if we take a look at exploits, for example, you can see that in terms of exploits, they're sorted out in terms of their operating system, right? Or the target operating system or platform. So for example, we have the Android platform, we have Apple iOS, we have BSD, BSDI, we have Firefox, FreeBSD, Linux, we have NetWare, we also have Solaris, Windows, Unix, OS X, all the operating systems that Metasploit currently has exploits for. So again, if we're looking for a particular exploit, we can go into the into that particular directory. We can say, hey, I'm looking for Windows exploits. So enter the Windows directory. You can now see they're now based on a protocol or the service that these exploits are primarily targeted towards. So for example, we have antivirus exploits, backdoors, email, browser, firewall. We have MySQL, MSSQL. We also have PostgreSQL, etc., etc., etc. We have POP3. We have all the various services that are available. So now that we have an understanding of how it structures and sorts out its modules and how it's able to manage that level of complexity, we can actually get started with the framework. So getting started with the framework is really very simple. All we need to do is type in MSF console and that'll start it up. But before we do that, we need to ensure that if this is your first time running the Metasploit framework through the Metasploit console, all we need to do firstly is we need to ensure that we start the PostgreSQL database service, which comes again pre-packaged and pre-installed with Kali. And Metasploit uses the PostgreSQL database to store all the relevant database file names regarding the modules that are currently set up. And this will reduce the amount of search time that you'll actually need when searching for modules. So we use system control and we say start. And we're going to start the service here. So we'll give that a few seconds to start the service. And that should start it. And then we want to launch the MSFDB or the Metasploit Framework Database. So we can hit enter. You can see the Metasploit Framework Database. These are the options available to us. We can initialize the database. We can reinitialize the database if we so want to. We can delete it, start, stops. We can check the status and we can run it. So what we can do is we can initialize it. So we say MSFDB. and we say init and hit enter, and it's going to say we need to run it as root. So I'm going to do that, hit enter. It's going to say database already started, creating the database user MSF and creating the database MSF as well. So this will, again, the reason why we have the Metasploit database or the Metasploit framework database is because this database is used to store all the various indexing for all the modules, and you'll see how much faster searching for an exploit or a payload is in a few seconds. So again, we're just going to let the database initialize here, and then we're going to get started with the actual framework, and I'll just take you through some basic options that we'll be using. So there we are. It's going to create the initial database schema, and don't worry if you get any errors. Those are perfectly fine. It really will not cause much of an issue at all. So again, we'll just wait for this to complete. Right, so once the database is initialized, we can get started by typing in MSF console, like so. And that should start up the Metasploit console for us. That way it's going to tell us starting the Metasploit framework console. We'll give that a few seconds, and there we are. So this is the Metasploit framework console, and we can now get started with me explaining all the various options. So again, if I open up the help menu, this will give us some general documentation regarding all the commands that we can run. So this is a great place to start with if you're a beginner. It really does help, and it's a very, very well documented and simply documented so that you really don't need to analyze exactly what it's saying. So again, for example, if I type in banner, it will just display an awesome Metasploit banner. If I, click on connect or get or any of the other commands, it explains exactly what it does. Right. So what I will do now is I just want to show you the typical workflow when you talk about exploitation using the framework. So firstly, if I want to show, for example, exploits, I can simply type in exploits, hit enter, right? And that's going to show me all the exploits, which is not something you would typically do. What you do typically is you would search for the exploit that you're looking for, and I've demonstrated this in the previous modules. However, we'll be taking a look at it even more now. So again, this is going to be a huge index, which is why it's taking so much time, because there's like almost too many modules to actually count in regards to exploits. So you can see we have all of these exploits that are sorted out here. And the key thing to take a look at firstly is if I just reduce the, I'll just reduce the font size here so that I can explain a few things. If I search for an exploit, and let's say I know the name of the exploit, let's say I'm looking for Eternal Blue, right? I can search for Eternal Blue. You can see that it's going to give us the matching modules. However, in regards to the modules, you can see that these are going to be different modules, and they are structured as followed. So again, you need to also understand the directory structure, which I explained. So at the top level, we have auxiliary modules, which are used primarily to perform scans. So you can see this is an auxiliary module of type admin. It's an SMB module, and it's based off the MS17010 command execution exploit, right? And it just gives you information regarding that particular module. So in regards to the auxiliary scanner, you can see it right over here. So this is an auxiliary module, and it's of type scanner, and it's based off the SMB protocol, and it's of this particular exploit, the SMB MS17010. And this is used to check whether a system is vulnerable to the Eternal Blue vulnerability. Right, you then have the ones at the bottom here, which are all exploits, because you can see this is an exploit, and they're based on Windows, SMB. They're essentially based on the MS17010 exploit. So this one right here is primarily designed to work on Windows 7 systems and older. You then have this one, which is designed to work on Windows 8. You then have, of course, your PSExec right over here, and then you have your remote code execution. And in regards to the disclosure date and the other columns, you can see that the rank is going to be very important, because the rank essentially tells you the actual effectiveness of these particular modules in regards to the results that you're likely to get. Now, you can pretty much search for the modules you're looking for, performing research and stuff like that. And then once you've identified the module that you want to use, you can simply just copy the name here. So you can just say copy selection, or you can type it out for yourself and just hit use, and we say use, and we essentially paste that name here, the module name. And you can now see that when you've selected a particular module, it will say it's an auxiliary module, and then it gives you the actual module right over here, and that's going to be highlighted in red. Now, when you have specified a module, you can show the various options associated with this module. So if I say show options, it will give you the various options that you can set for this particular module, which in this case is an auxiliary module. So for example, we can set the command to run, we can set the SMB domain, SMB password, the SMB share, etc., etc. I'm not really going to get into this too much. I just want to explain how this works. And then when you want to run the exploit or that particular module, you just type in run. And of course, in this case, it's going to tell us that the auxiliary failed because we did not enter our target address, which is fine. So if we want to set an option, in this case, it's telling us we need to set our rhosts option, which is our target. We can say set, and we type in the actual option name. So if I'm setting the rhosts option, I type in set rhost, and then I set the value of rhosts. So I set that to 10.0.0.6, for example. I hit enter, and now if I hit run, you can see the exploit is going to run. And of course, I've not selected any valid target here. So it's going to tell me that the host was unreachable, which is expected, and the auxiliary module execution completed, and we really did not get any results. So again, setting options is fairly simple, and this will become more apparent when we move on to the next video, when we'll actually be taking a look at creating our payload with MSF Venom, and I'll be taking you through the exploitation of the Windows with Windows Server 2008 box, which is Metasploitable 3, and this will all become much clearer. So when you want to exit, you can type in back, and you can then hit exit, and that'll take you out of the framework, and you should be back into your normal terminal. So that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at generating payloads with MSF Venom. Now, given that we are delving into the exploitation phase, it is very important to understand and to know how to generate payloads. Now, in the context of exploitation, payloads are essentially the piece of code that is executed on the target after successful exploitation, right? So a payload can do anything on the target. It can execute a command, it can delete files, it can download additional files onto the system. In this case, we're going to be taking a look at generating a Meterpreter payload. Now, Meterpreter essentially gives us remote access to the target system and will allow us to execute commands remotely on the target system. Now, I'm not going to get into the Meterpreter right now because we're talking about generating the Meterpreter payload. In the next video, we'll talk about encoding it so that we can bypass any antivirus when we're executing the particular payload on the target, which is very important, especially when dealing with Windows systems. So the tool we're going to be utilizing is a tool called MSF Venom. Now, MSF Venom goes hand in hand with Metasploit. And if I just open up a terminal here and I say MSF Venom and I hit enter, you can see it gives us a ton of options. But if we take a look at the information given to us, you can see that it tells us this is a Metasploit standalone payload generator. So it's used to generate payloads that you can then use with the Metasploit console, and I'll be getting into that very shortly. All right, so this is also a replacement for MSF payload and MSF encode, which is important. So let me just give you a brief history lesson into payload generation, especially with Metasploit. So before we had MSF Venom, we had two tools, MSF payload and MSF encode, which by their names, you can pretty much tell what they did. MSF payload was used to generate payloads, and MSF encode was used to encode payloads to bypass antiviruses in general. And these two tools were combined into one tool, which is what we have now, MSF Venom. Now, as I said, MSF Venom allows you to generate payloads. And when we talk about payloads, there are two key elements that come into play. Number one is the type of connection you're going to be establishing in terms of the protocol. So you can see that we can generate reverse TCP connections, and we can also generate reverse HTTP connections. So we can specify the protocol to use. And then we're also going to take a look at the platform that the various platforms that are available. And the great thing about MSF Venom is you can generate payloads for various platforms. So you can generate Windows payloads right over here. You can generate Linux or Unix payloads. You can generate BSD payloads, so on and so forth, or macOS payloads. And then where it gets even more interesting is where you can actually start generating web payloads. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up my browser here. And if I open up google.com and we search for MSF Venom, and we search for cheat sheet, right? And I'll just click on the first link right over here. So we have some very helpful cheat sheets that will actually list out to you all the various payloads that you can generate and the commands that you can use to run them. And these cheat sheets are really helpful because sometimes you might want to check up on various payloads that are targeted towards particular platforms. So again, if we just take a look at the examples under binaries, you can see that we can generate Linux reverse shells or the Linux Meterpreter reverse shell payload. We can also generate a bind shell, which is different to a reverse shell. With the reverse shell, the connection is actually incoming to you, or you are going to listen for the connection from the target instead of making a connection to the target where firewalls can then block the connection. So a reverse shell is usually preferred. You then have the Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP shell, which is right over here. You then have the Windows reverse TCP shell, which does not use the Meterpreter. We're not going to be using that. We also have the Windows encoded Meterpreter Windows reverse shell, which we'll be taking a look at in the next video. You then have macOS. You have the various macOS reverse shells right over here. And then you have the web payload. So if I'm running Apache and I'm running PHP on a backend on a server, I can then generate a PHP payload, which can then be executed and can then give us a reverse shell. We have ASP Meterpreter reverse TCP payloads, which are used for Microsoft Windows servers or Microsoft IIS servers. And the format, as you can see, is ASP. You also have your JSP Java Meterpreter reverse TCP payloads, so on and so forth. You also have your various scripting payloads based on Python, Bash, and Perl. So this MSF Venom is really, really robust. Now let's get exactly to what we're going to be doing. So we are going to be generating the Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP shell. And the two important elements that we need to specify are going to be your lhost and lport. And if you watched the earlier video, you remember that these two are also featured within the Metasploit Fundamentals video. In this case, the lhost is the listening IP address, and that is going to be our IP address or the attacker's IP address. And this is the connection to which you want your reverse shell to connect to, so you can start executing commands. And your lport is the port that you want the target to connect to on your local machine. So you can see the command is fairly simple to run. We specify the format as exe and we specify the file name. So we're going to generate our first Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP shell. And doing it is extremely simple. All we need to do is open up our terminal and we'll say MSF Venom, and I'll just clear my terminal. So MSF Venom. And then we specify our lhost options, which is going to be my Kali Linux IP address. So I'll open up a new terminal and I'll just list out my IP address like so. And you can see it's 10.0.0.5. So we'll enter that right now. So 10.0.0.5. And then we want to enter in the L port, right? The L port is going to be the port that we want to listen on. By default, this is set to 4444. You can set it to a port that is clandestine if you want. In our case, we'll just leave it as is, and then we specify the format as exe, and we can then output this into a exe file. So we specify the file name. So I can just call this. We'll just call this payload.exe and hit enter. Right now, this payload is extremely effective. However, one problem that you'll come across when dealing with Windows and Windows exploitation is the fact that you'll come across antivirus software, which again are going to detect payloads that are not encoded or obfuscated in any sense. So again, we'll just give this a few seconds to generate the payload. It shouldn't take too much time at all. And once it's generated, we can then use this payload to gain remote access to a system. So we can either download this payload onto the target system through social engineering. We can do it through a web server, so on and so forth. We can also take a look at binding it to another exe so that again you can use it in a form of a spear phishing social engineering attack. In this case, you can see it's generated. It tells us no platform was selected and no architecture was selected. You can also specify the architecture by going into the Windows option right over here. So I can generate a 64-bit payload. So I can say X64 and I can hit enter. That's going to generate a 64-bit payload, which is very important. So what I'll do is I'll just let that generate. This is the 32-bit payload, and it gives you information regarding the payload. The payload size is 341 bytes, and the final size of the exe file is 73802 bytes. So again, we'll just wait for the 64-bit payload to generate, and again, it's of course it's generated 2 of them. So what I'll do is I'll just remove the payload.exe right over here and generate the 32-bit one more time. And in the next video, we'll talk about encoding the payload, and we'll also preserve the original version so that when we're testing it out, I can actually show you that the antivirus detects it. And again, we'll take a look at the differences between the encoded payload and the non-encoded payload. So I'm just going to wait for this to complete generating, after which we'll move on to the next video. There we are. This is the 32-bit payload, and we have it ready, and we can now move on to the next video. Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about encoding payloads with MSF Venom. Now, again, just to go over the importance of encoding and where we're doing it, encoding essentially helps us bypass antivirus detection. Now, encoding is usually not a very reliable way of bypassing antiviruses, primarily because antiviruses on Windows are going to be signature based, and most of these signatures already have been captured. So it's going to depend on the type of encoder that you use and the various encoding frameworks that you utilize. And then, of course, there's the obvious element of crypting. Now, in this video, we're going to be focusing on the Shikata Ganai encoder, which is one of the most one of the greatest encoders that you can find actually with MSF Venom, one of the best working encoders. And of course, if we take a look at the cheat sheet that we had visited earlier, you can see that we actually have the encoded Meterpreter Windows reverse shell right over here that utilizes Shikata Ganai. However, this example does not include things like bad characters, which I'll explain in a few seconds. Now, again, generating it is extremely simple. You go about just specifying MSF Venom, specify the payload, and then you can also specify the architecture. And typically, when generating an encoded payload, it is recommended that you use a 64-bit payload instead of 32-bit. But again, 32-bit just works fine as well. So again, you specify the payload and then use the encoder option and specify Shikata Ganai, and you specify the iterations or the amount of times you want to encode the payload. The more, the better. So what we'll do is we'll go into our terminal, and if I list out MSF Venom, and I'll just open up the help menu right over here, and I'll just try and reduce the font size so that I can display things much clearer. I'm looking for the encoder option, which is right over here. So the encoder option is denoted by using the minus or -e. And then we're also going to be taking a look at the bad characters, which we can use the default ones by default, of course, which are going to be X00, XFF. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So the first thing we want to do is let's try and list out the various encoders that we have, right? So MSF Venom, and I can then list out encoders, right, and hit enter, and that's going to take a few seconds, and then you can go through all the various encoders that you have based on the use case scenario, and of course they're going to be sorted out in terms of their success rate and their functionality. So again, we'll just wait for this to load up, and then we can specify or use the Shikata Ganai encoder. So there we are. It lists out all the various encoders available. And the important thing you want to take a look at is, of course, the platform. So this is CMD. You also have x64, x86 or 32-bit. And then, of course, you have your rank, which sorts it out from low to excellent. And of course, low means this is not a very good encoder. Excellent means this is an excellent encoder. And in our case, we're looking for Shikata Ganai. All right, so Shikata Ganai is right over here, and Shikata Ganai is a polymorphic XOR additive feedback encoder. And to use it, we just need to copy the name right over here. So I'm just going to do that right now, and we can go about generating our payload. So again, generating it is very, very simple. And by the way, we can specify the payload architecture beforehand. And again, if I say MSF Venom, I can say MSF Venom, and I can then specify the architecture. If it's x86, I can say x86 or x64, so on and so forth. In my case, I'm just going to leave it to 32-bit. So I'll specify the payload, and the payload is going to be Windows. It's going to be reverse TCP. We're going to set the lhost. We'll say lhost is going to be equal to, I'll just open up a terminal just to confirm that the options are correct. And we'll say it is 10.0.0.5, right? So we say 10.0.0.5, and we say lport is going to be, we'll also set this to 4444 just to keep things standardized. And then we need to specify our encoder, right? But what we can do beforehand is we can just specify our format, which is going to be XEXE, and then our encoder we'll specify by using the E option, and then I'm going to paste in my encoder, which is Shikata Ganai. We then need to specify the iterations, so I can specify the iterations by using the -I option, and I can specify 5 iterations, and that represents the number of times the payload is going to be encoded. And then I can specify the bad characters, right? So I can specify bad characters here. So if I open up my terminal and I say MSF Venom, and I'll just use the default bad characters that we want to get rid from the encoded payload. So right over here, we'll just copy these bad characters. These are the default bad characters, and we'll just paste this in here. And we can then output this into the file name that we want. So again, we're just going to say encoded. We'll say encoded.exe, and I'm going to hit enter. And mind you, this is encoding using MSF Venom. We also have frameworks like Veil Evasion, which are much more powerful. But in this case, let's just use the default Shikata Ganai encoder with MSF Venom. So we'll give that a few seconds to generate the encoded payload. There we are. And again, it's going to use the default 32-bit architecture. It's going to say found one compatible encoder attempting to encode the payload with 5 iterations, and it gives us the final size. There we are. And if we list out the files that we now have the payload.exe and the encoded payload right over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a directory, and I'll just say MSF Venom payloads. And I'll just create that directory, and I'm going to move all exe files, all the files that we've generated, to MSF Venom payloads. There we are. And when we now use other frameworks, we'll sort them out that way so that we can avoid any potential confusion. That being said, that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, we'll start testing out the various payloads that we've generated, and we'll take a look at generating or encoding the payloads with frameworks like Veil Evasion. So I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at testing the various payloads that we had generated. The target systems we're going to be using are going to be Windows 7 and Windows 10. And yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. So before we actually get started, I just want to explain a few things regarding our attack vector. Now, this is not really a complicated or real attack in, you know, if I were to use the common terms to explain it. Primarily because we're in the early stages of exploitation, we want to test our payloads to see if they'll actually work. Now, when we move on to using you know, frameworks like Veil Evasion, which are great, which can actually be used to engineer or to create more sophisticated social engineering attacks, where we can trick users into executing the payloads, or we can bind the payload to a legitimate executable like a setup file for a popular program like a browser or like Google Chrome. We can use multiple techniques, social engineering techniques, to actually get users to actually click on the executables and the payloads that we've created, and therefore get a reverse connection. And as I said, we'll be taking a look at more advanced attacks as we move along, where we don't need to make physical contact with the target. But in this video, we're going to be doing it manually. And the reason we're doing this is to actually show you the difference between the encoded payload and the unencoded payload, and how the various antivirus solutions respond. So without further ado, let's get started. Now I'm going to head over into my encoded payload directory. So MSF Venom payloads, and if I list out the payloads, we have encoded and the payload.ext right over here. So we'll start off with the Windows 7 virtual machine. The first thing we need to do is we need to get these payloads onto the target system. One way we can do that is by setting up a web server and then navigating to that web server, downloading the files manually on the target and executing them. Right? So we can do that really simply by either setting up Apache, or we can use the simple Python module, a simple HTTP server to set up a very quick and robust web server. So to do that, we need to say Python M, and this requires root privileges. So we say sudo Python M, and we say simple HTTP server. And we can then use tab autocompletion, and we specify the port we want to listen to. So we'll say port 80, and it's going to, as you can see, it's going to serve all the files within this directory on port 80 on the Kali Linux virtual machine. And in this case, if I open up a new tab and I just list out my IP, you can see it's 10.0.0.5. All right. Now, before we actually get into executing the payloads on the target, we need to set up our reverse listener, because remember, these payloads are reverse shells, which means they're going to connect back to us. And in order for them to connect back to us, we need to be listening to them. We need to be listening for them. And the way we do this is by using the exploit handler with the Metasploit console. So I'm going to open up the Metasploit console here. We'll give that a few seconds. And once we specify the exploit handler, we then need to specify the payload that we use to generate the various the payloads that we actually generated. So we just need to specify the options that we used when we were creating the payload and specify the port and the IP that we had specified. So we say use exploit. This is use. Like so. And then we specify the payload which we had used during the creation process, which was set. So we say set payload. And we hit enter. You can see the payload has been set. So if I say show options, you can see that the only options we need to set are the options we had set when creating the payload. So we need to just specify, in this case, the lhost, which is the Kali Linux IP. So again, we say set. Hit enter, and the L port is set by default to 4444, which we had already set when we were creating the payload. So now that we have that running, or now that we have that set, we can now run this and set up the listener. So you can see it's set, it started the reverse TCP handler on the Kali Linux IP and on the port 4444. So it's now currently listening for connections. So now we need to move on to the next stage, where we try and download the payloads onto the Windows 7 target and execute them, and let's see if we can get a Meterpreter session back. All right, so I'm just going to open up the Windows 7 VM, which is right over here. And again, we're going to access the web server that we created with the simple HTTP server with Python. And that is going to be serving the files from the Kali Linux IP address. So I'll just clear I'll just get rid of that. And that is under 10.0.0.5. I hit enter. You can see the web server is set up successfully, and we can now start downloading the payloads. Now, by default, I've disabled Windows Defender. So if I click on Windows Defender, sorry, that is incorrect. Let me just search for Defender. That is Windows Defender. There we are. And we take a look at tools and options, and real-time protection is currently enabled, right? So that is currently enabled. So I'll click on encoded, or I'll click on the payload first. This is the unencoded payload. So I'll click on that and I'll save the file. And there we are. If I open up my downloads folder, the payload is still there. So the antivirus hasn't done much yet. So I'll run this as administrator, hit enter, and the payload is now running. So how do we know if we've actually got a reverse shell or a reverse Meterpreter session? If I go back into Kali, you can see it sends the stage to the target. The target has an IP of 10.0.0.12 or 12, and we get a Meterpreter session that is opened, and we now have a Meterpreter session, and that is denoted by this Meterpreter line right over here. So the Meterpreter session essentially allows us to execute commands on the system, and it gives us remote access. So an example of this is if I say sysinfo, this will list out the information about the target. So in this case, you can see it's Windows 7 and gives us information regarding the service pack, the architecture, the work group it belongs to, and the Meterpreter session. In this case, is a 32-bit Meterpreter session. Now you can also get more commands from your Meterpreter by clicking on the help option right over here. So if I just click on help, just open that up right now. So there we are. We can use the help option, and the help option gives you all the various commands that you can run. Meterpreter is an extremely powerful tool. You're able to essentially do anything, and I'll just take you through some of the important ones. So the first thing we want to take a look at are the core commands. So the core commands allow us to deal with the Meterpreter session, so we can background the session and have it running in the background while we try and exploit other machines. We can also take a look at processes in the background that are currently running on the target. We can migrate to these processes, so on and so forth. We'll take a look at the other ones. For the file system commands, we can download files or a directory onto the system. We can also print the working directory, all the various Unix commands that you're familiar with running. We can also upload files. We can search for files, so on and so forth. We can also get a shell on the system, which will give us a command prompt, remote command prompt. We also have networking commands. We can take a look at the IP configuration. We can take a look at the route configuration right over here. We can also take a look at the standard API system commands, which allow us to perform some post-exploitation techniques like clearing the event log on Windows. We can drop a token for impersonation. We can execute a command. We can get privileges. So this will essentially try and escalate our privileges automatically. We can get the user ID, so on and so forth. We can reboot the system, so on and so forth. We can also then perform some user interface commands like get the desktop, and that'll get the current Meterpreter desktop. We can key event, send key events. We can send keystrokes. We can dump the keystroke buffer. We can start capturing keystrokes. And yeah, so there's tons of commands that we can actually do. And then of course, when we talk about password commands, we can perform a hash dump, which will dump the contents of the SAM database. So if I perform hash dump, for example, so if I say hash dump, hit enter, it gives us the various hashes for all the users on the system. If I say get system, which will try and elevate my privileges, you can see it got the system, and we were successfully able to elevate our privileges using the named pipe impersonation. If I type in get user ID and I hit enter, we now have NT authority access or administrative access on the system. I can then hit shell, and that'll give me a command prompt, which you should be familiar with. There we are. And I can then run commands like so. I can then terminate this and go back into my Meterpreter session. As I said, if I want to background my session, I can say background, and that is going to background the session. The session is still running, so I can then, perform exploits. I can then also set up other listeners and get other reverse shells, basically do anything with Metasploit while that session is running in the background. If I type in sessions, you can see the session is under active sessions, is currently running, and that means I can switch to it at any time. To do that, I say sessions and provide the session ID. In this case, it's going to be 1, and I hit enter, and you can see I'm back. I say get user ID, and that lists out NT authority system. So again, we can see that worked successfully. And in terms of Windows 7 Service Pack 1, the antivirus really didn't detect anything, which is a good sign. So we can take a look at the encoded payload, and then we'll take a look at whether we can do this on Windows 10 as well. All right, so what I will do is I will say exit, and that is going to shut down the Meterpreter session, and we'll just set up a listener again. And what we're going to do now is let's try and run the encoded payload, which again will not make much of a difference. So I'll just delete the payload that is unencoded, and we'll just download the encoded payload right over here. Save file. That's going to save the encoded one, and we'll just run this as administrator. And if we go back, you can see we get a Meterpreter session. And again, there isn't much of a difference, primarily because we're dealing with an older version of Windows. And again, I can say get system, and that should get, in this case, you can see it's telling us that access is denied. And that's primarily, I think, because we have obfuscated the payload. So again, if I say get user ID, because we run this as the administrator, we still are logged in as the IE7 user or the Internet Explorer user. So now you can see that automatic privilege escalation has failed. We now need to perform manual privilege escalation, which is what we're going to be taking a look at in the privilege escalation section. All right, so we still are able to get a Meterpreter session on Windows 7. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start up the Windows 10 virtual machine, and I will just exit from this session, and we can then test it on the Windows 10 VM. All right, so I've set up the Windows VM and it's currently running. So the first thing we want to do is let us set up the listener on Kali here, and we can now head over to the Windows VM. And we're going to start off by disabling the antivirus firstly, and the antivirus we're going to be using by default is Windows Defender. And again, the purpose of this video is to just explain to you the differences, between the encoded and unencoded payload. And then of course, we'll be talking about more advanced encoders like veil evasion. So I'll just open up my browser, and you can actually see on Windows Defender, I currently have that disabled. If I click on Virus and Threat Protection and click on Manage Settings, real-time detection or protection is also disabled. Essentially, the antivirus is disabled, and we're going to be using the encoded payload because the payload or the unencoded payload is going to get detected really easily, and the encoded payload will work by default when Windows Defender is disabled. So I'll just click on the encoded payload and hit save. And Windows 10 by default should have various security features enabled to prevent me from executing this. So if I double click to run it, it should actually tell me that Windows is protected my PC, but I can execute it anyway. If I click on Kali, we still have that listening here. So I'll just hit run one more time, and we get a Meterpreter session again. And this time it successfully looks like Windows Defender had the scheduler enabled, which kept it running in the background. This is one of the problems with Windows. So there we are. It looks like we have access. And if I type in sysinfo, you can see we currently have access. We have Windows 10 and the build number and the architecture 64-bit. So given that we know the architecture, we can actually try and migrate the Meterpreter session because it's currently a 32-bit Meterpreter session. We can migrate it to a 64-bit Meterpreter session, which is much more reliable because the architecture that's running on the system or the actual system is 64-bit. So to do this, we need to analyze the processes that are running on the target, and of course, I can list that out by typing in PS. And the process that we're looking for, because all processes have the 64-bit architecture, the process we're looking for by default is the Explorer.exe. This is the most stable process that you can migrate to when dealing with Windows. So I can look for it right over here. I can look for Explorer.exe, and that has a process ID of 5308. So if we want to migrate to this process, all we need to type in is migrate and the process ID, which is listed right over here on the first column. So I can type in migrate, and I say 5308, and I hit enter, and that should migrate to that 64-bit process, and it tells us migration completed successfully. If I type in sysinfo now, you can now see we have a 64-bit Meterpreter session, and again we can then try and run all the various other commands. So if I say hash dump, you can see that that is going to fail because we're dealing with a more advanced, newer operating system, in this case Windows 10. However, as I've showed you, we can still get a Meterpreter session with with Windows Defender disabled. However, again, Shikata Ganai is now outdated. However, it will work on older versions of Windows like Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows Server 2008. For the latest versions of Windows, you want to start using other encoders like the veil evasion framework, so on and so forth, which we'll be covering. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. This was just a very basic foray into testing the various payloads that we created and showing you how to establish a remote connection to your target, how to, we've taken a look at some of the basic Meterpreter commands. We'll be taking a look at a lot more as we move along. But that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Eternal Blue exploit, specifically targeting Windows 7 and any older operating system. So this will not work on Windows 10 and later. So again, I'll just take you through one of the actual disclosures here, or really just a primer that gives you more information regarding this particular exploit if you're not familiar with it already. It was famously used by the WannaCry, or used in the WannaCry attack, and it is an exploit developed by the NSA. So Eternal Blue is an exploit that allows cyber threat actors to remotely execute arbitrary code and gain access to a network by sending specially crafted packets. It exploits a software vulnerability in Microsoft Windows operating systems SMB or server message block version 1. So again, this is more specifically going to affect only Windows operating systems with SMB version 1. A network file sharing protocol that allows access to files on a remote server, and by default Windows will typically have SMB enabled, as it's again used for sharing files and peripherals like network devices like printers, network attached storage, etc. So this exploit potentially allows cyber threat access to compromise the entire network and all devices connected to it. Due to Eternal Blue's ability to compromise network, if one device is infected by the malware via Eternal Blue, every device connected to the network is at risk. Now, as I said, we're going to be exploiting the Eternal Blue exploit, and we are going to be targeting the Windows 7 virtual machine. So I already have that up and running, and again, we'll just open up MSF console. Metasploit already has a module built in for this particular exploit that allows us to again gain access. This exploit will give us a Meterpreter reverse TCP session, which means we can execute commands on the target. And again, if you compare it to the manual types of attacks where we had to manually generate payloads, in this case we don't have to make contact with the operating system. It can be done remotely. The only thing you need is the target's IP address. So I will search for Eternal Blue, and we're not talking about the double pulsar vulnerability. We are primarily talking about the Windows. This is exploit Windows SMB MS 17010 PS exec. So again, this will allow SMB remote code execution. So we want to select that module, and we can then use, we say use, and we hit enter, and it's going to specify the default payload as Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP. If your version of Windows or the target version of Windows is running a 64-bit, ensure that you set the payload to set payload, and you specify Windows x64, and again Meterpreter reverse TCP. In my case, the target is a 32-bit version of Windows 7. So again, I can just hit show options, and the options that we can set are listed above here. So again, we need to set the rhost to the target, and pretty much everything else can be left by default. So what we can do is we can say set rhosts, and we're going to set that to 10.0.0.12. That is the IP address of the Windows 7 virtual machine. So I'm going to hit enter, and that's pretty much all we need to do. The SMB port by default is going to be 445, and that is how it is configured on Windows systems. All we need to do now is hit run, and it's going to start, and there we are. It's going to send the stage for us, and we get a Meterpreter session. And again, I can confirm that by typing in sysinfo, and I can hit enter, and there we are. We can see it's Windows 7 Service Pack 1. It's a 32-bit system, and we have a 32-bit version of Meterpreter running. Again, we can then run additional Meterpreter commands like get system. I hit enter, and we get the system. If I get use ID now, you can see we have NT authority and we have administrative access. So just through one exploit, I was able to get administrative access using Metasploit without having to access or having physical access to the target machine, without performing social engineering. The only thing I require is the target IP address, and of course the parameters have to be that it is running Windows 7 or older. Right now, we're going to be talking about various other types of attacks, and in the next module, we'll be talking about encoding using particular frameworks like Veil Evasion, where things will become much more interesting. So I just thought I would take you through the Eternal Blue exploit. Again, you can try it out with your own virtual machines. Extremely powerful and can lead to the compromise, as mentioned within the primer here, of an entire network. And again, this was used during the WannaCry ransomware attack, and it was usually targeting various companies and hospitals that still had older versions of Windows 7 Enterprise running, which again were vulnerable to this particular exploit, and they were able to gain access extremely simply, or really easily. And as you can see, I was able to get administrative privileges, which means I practically own the system at this point. That being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.